Oh, that's great.
That's good.
Oh, wait a minute. Is this?
In fact, you all would rather be on computer right now.
Yeah, I have to be on computer.
And you'll need to sign in real quick, so make sure, because I believe that we still
It's
have.
Bowden 88. I signed in earlier.
Oh, what's going on? Where is it?
There's the guy on the.
Did you accidentally shut? Oh,
Here we come.
well, I'm a little concerned it's not coming up.
This
What's
is
going on?
John Myers.
Uh-oh.
Villages, he's going to speak. Yeah, he's going to speak. I gave one to the board.
Yeah, you need
Nothing's coming up.
to be up on a computer. I'm worried that your computer might be off. Oh, there it is. And let's make sure that you're signed in. Yeah, okay, so we'll just go back over to board regular meeting.
And the vote's going to be over there, right?
Yes, the vote will be on.
Over there.
Yes.
Okay. I can see there without glasses. I can't see here, though.
Switch over.
Good afternoon. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you to the school board meeting Tuesday, July 14th of 2020. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It'd be nice to get back to normal and have our students in here doing the flag salute. I miss that. Well, I miss seeing students. Even my grandson won't come near me. Not that I have the plague, I don't. Mrs. Corcoran?
I actually don't have a superintendent's report. We have a number of new business items, so I figured we'd just try to move along.
Thank you. Moving right along is the hearing of citizens. Each speaker will have 3 minutes, and when the timer flashes yellow over there, please begin to summarize. You must stop speaking when the buzzer starts. Please note that respect for divergent viewpoints and civility will be shown at every board meeting. Whether you agree or disagree with the speaker, you should listen and without making any sounds of approval or disapproval. Per state statute, anyone causing a disruption will first be given a warning, and if the conduct does not stop, you will be removed from the chambers. And my first card is John Meisel, M-E-I-S-E-L. Sorry if I butcher your name.
That's okay. It's Meisel. Thank you.
Meisel.
Yep. Did a very nice job. Good morning, everyone. My name is John Meisel, and I'm representing residents of the West Villages regarding the proposed land swap of the current 60 acres for 130 acres that would support a future high school sometime 5 or 10, 15, 20 years down the road. What I'd like to point out is, first, you all should have received a letter from Attorney LaRoe. Let me apologize for Mr. LaRoe because there was actually a misspelling, and he sent it to the school board, so that shows bad sign. But on the last page, he put fell instead of feel. Everyone should have that in their inbox if they haven't had a chance to read it, but you also have a copy of that. So I ask for that you take the time to review that. We uncovered quite a few irregularities associated with not only the current property acquisition, but also the proposed acquisition. I'm going to focus on the current acquisition, and my friend and neighbor, Mr. Fernstrom, is going to focus on the proposed. Most importantly, back in April 26th, Minnesota Beach Ranchlands sold that parcel of property to WVID, West Villages Improvement District, for $4.95 million. Fast forward 5 months later to September, Minnesota Beach Ranchlands enters into an agreement with Sarasota County School Board for a real property dedication for that same said property, and in exchange for conveying or cause to be conveyed that property at no consideration for $3.65 million in impact fee credits. That's a total of $8.6 million they received the benefit of for a property that was valued at the time at 4.9 residential fee simple appraisal. That's a nice hefty profit. Profit's not an ugly word, but I won't I won't finish that sentence. You all can finish it for me. That being said, the reason I'm concerned about that is I'm a taxpayer. The $4.95 million that paid for that property from WVID was paid for with bonds that I and every single resident of Sarasota County within the West Villages has to pay for the next 30 years. Nothing in the charter of WVID requires them to donate property whatsoever. Albeit, they'll say that it happened 5 years ago, 4 years ago, it's in the rearview mirror. It's not in the rearview mirror because we have to write that check every single year when we pay our CDD fees. In addition to that, when you look at how it was transferred, if you look at the Sarasota County website, on April 25th, the property was actually conveyed to WVID before they even passed a referendum to approve the purchase. That's like Mr. Dumas writing a check for $5 million without coming to you first and saying, is it okay if I write that check for $5 million? What most people don't realize is WVID is controlled. 4 out of the 5 seats are filled by the vacant. 4 of the 5 seats are filled by Minnesota Beach Ranch Lands and their appointees. They control the board. And so they're rubber stamping everything that comes through without giving any due consideration to us constituents that pay the taxes and have to pay those bonds. I ask that you look at that and take into consideration not only the email, but also the information that Mr. Fernstrom is going to share as you make your decision on whether or not you want to approve this. We're asking you to not approve it today. Study it some more, understand all the differences and irregularities, and come to a consensus amongst all parties, including the taxpayers, Minnesota Beach Ranch Lands, WVID, and Sarasota County School Board. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next is David Firstelum. I know I butchered that one.
No, you did pretty well with it, actually. Been done much worse.
I couldn't read the end, so I might as well look
Sorry,
better.
bad handwriting. My name's David Fernstrom. I'm also a resident of West Villages Improvement District in the city of Northport. I want to talk to you about this deal because, from my perspective, the taxpayers in the West Villages Improvement District and in this school district have been fleeced in the past with the transaction involving the 60-acre parcel in West Villages, and it looks to me like you're on the verge of being fleeced once again. I want to focus on the values that are purportedly being exchanged in this transaction. You're giving up the old 60-acre parcel. When you paid for it, you paid based on an assessment or an appraisal based on highest best residential use. But what you got was a deed that was restricted to public educational campus only. According to the most recent appraisals, that limitation reduced the value of your property by 20%. You should understand that as soon as this property is reacquired by the developer, that restriction will disappear. The property will therefore be worth, again, 20% more than what's being proposed based on current appraisals. All of your appraisals downgrade the value of that property based on its use restriction. As to the new property, the value has been inflated from my perspective, by millions of dollars in several ways. First, it's been appraised as 2 parcels separately. And all of the appraisers who looked at it said, smaller parcels cost more per acre than large parcels. There's no reason to divide that parcel in 2. It inflates the appraised value by something on the order of 10%. On $17 million, that's $1.7 million down the drain for no reason. The values also don't reflect the use restriction that's proposed in the exchange agreement. If you go through with this deal as written, the property you acquire will be subject to a use restriction, public educational campus only for the next 20 years. So you can't sell it for fair market value at any time in that 20-year period if you decide you don't need it. If you're paying full value for residential property, you ought to have the right to sell it as residential property, not for 20% off. Finally, the appraisals that were done totaled 141 acres. The exchange agreement you're being offered provides you with 130 acres. That's a 7.8% reduction in what you get for the appraised price. Like John, I suggest you take the time to really study this carefully, find out who's zooming whom on the values being exchanged, and while you're at it, I would encourage you to tie up all the loose ends that are proposed in this contract. Who's going to put in the road? Who's going to put in the infrastructure to support the school? There are a lot of dangling ends.
Thank you. Victor Dobrin?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I would like to bring the same subject. I'm Victor Dobrin, and I live in 20327 Real Circle, Venice, Florida, Gran Paradiso development. In 2017, when I moved here, I got very much interested in the affairs of the West Villages Improvement District. We called at that time the representative, Mr. Bob Rossman, who was on the board, our only homeowner representative, and he had no good answer because we were looking how the funds of Unit 1 were depleted at that time. And we had questions where this money went, so that we found out about 2 land purchases made on our behalf of the both homeowner and landowners, which there are many of them. And I don't want to dive into that specific transaction. But recently, our community was very concerned and by the fact that the location was changed, by the fact that there is no plan in the next 5 years actually to build a school. There is no physical plan that you have enacted. And at the same time, the question Mr. Firstrom and Meisel have raised with respect to the transaction which is in front of us. As a board member, as any official in any government unit in Florida, we or everybody has the state government, the local government, special districts such as yours, a fiduciary duty for the people you serve. And it's the whole county. And as Mr. Meisel spelled it out, we are still paying for the next 20 years the money on the first transaction. The transaction in the second chapter, which is in front of us, by estimates made by different people, it is between 1.7 and almost $4 million or in that range, which would impair the funds which could be used for other projects. But again, people were sold when they moved to West Villages, there will be a school next to the college, which is a property of the state and county actually, and that is evaporating. There is no physical plan from you, and there is this hurry up and go to a transaction which I would say, let's stop, think, evaluate, and do a fair deal. United States of America provides for all, for developers, for homeowner, and let's do the right things. I appreciate if you postpone this till you have the right view and the right assessment of this specific transaction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sean Kirkpatrick?
Sorry. Hi there. Thank you very much for letting us speak today. I was in the car when we heard the YouTube announcement that several of you considered the 831 postponement. That was really my number one reason why I came here, to see if that was on the table or not. So I'm going to skip over a few little things. Earlier you said the PPEs are going to be funded for most or all the teachers' classrooms. Is that going to include the hand sanitizers and those cartridges? Because those are very expensive. I wasn't sure, because they're kind of short right now around the country, if you have that already stocked up or any indication if that'll be,
Yes.
Okay. Also, I've been noticing that I've been hearing both on the July 2nd meeting that the Department of Health is going to be one of the major organizations that help determine the criteria for a quarantine protocols or school shutdown protocols. Have they given you indication what those might be, what's going to take if a quarantine kicks in, or what's going to happen? Have they given you any guidance on that since July 2nd?
They would give guidance to Mrs. Corcoran.
Ms. Corcoran.
And we don't normally ask to respond to questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So just continue to talk.
Okay, no, these are just questions, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was just questions. The 8/31 deadline that you're proposing, do you know roughly when the deadline will be for if you have to choose a virtual option? I know today was your first time thinking about it, but it's usually a week or two ahead of that date. Because the deadlines for Florida Virtual School is coming up soon, and I know.
I think their staff is working on that right now.
Okay.
Trying to decide who will be doing virtual, and they're working with the union.
Well,
and
they'll have time though to choose the option two that was
that's how it'll
presented.
be.
There'll be enough time though, deadline-wise, to choose option two.
Yes, because we're not opening until the 31st.
Okay.
So just so you're aware, we're asking for the school board to give us decisions that will finalize our plans.
Okay.
And as soon as we get that direction today, notifications will go out to parents and to faculty on what the items are.
Okay.
We have a meeting with the principals. We'd like to have parents make their final decisions no later than July 20th.
July 20th. Okay.
So that we can then move forward.
Okay, and my last thing's not really a question. A couple of my daughter's classes might only have one teacher teaching that subject, like specific subjects. Just consider what's going to happen if you're doing both in-class teaching with that one teacher and online with that one teacher. I hope you can come up with a good compromise for that. Thank you all so much. I know it's a hard job you're doing. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Wilson Pavis.
As you can tell by the ruffled shirt and the weird hat, I really did not want to speak today, but I was out in the caravan earlier, and I saw a sign that really stuck with me. So much so that I drove home, sat on it for a few minutes, and drove all the way back, speeding. Well, I'm not going to say that, through 41. And it was, what is a teacher's life worth? One parent returning back to work? Just the idea that we would reopen, that we would stick teachers that I've had who are still working, who are nearing retirement age, who are some of them in their case beyond retirement age and still working, in classrooms with 130, 140, 150 kids a day, and expect PPE to be the only thing between them and death it's frankly absurd. When I got this badge to become a substitute here in the county, I was damn proud of it. I remember being as a kid and looking at it and being like, oh, a badge, a blue badge. Getting one was a pride. I'm not proud of what I'm hearing. The idea that we would even endanger our kids who are our priority. You don't become a substitute, you don't become a teacher, you don't become a principal, generally you don't run for school board if you don't care about the kids. And right now what we're doing is we're putting them in danger, and we're pretending that we're taking care of them. We're pretending, and Sarasota has never been about pretending. It's been about actually putting in the legwork, putting in the grease, and actually protecting our students, protecting our teachers. I'm fairly young, I'm only in my early 20s. I've gone to one teacher's funeral. I go to bed nowadays thinking, who's the next one? Is it gonna be the one that told me, hey, why don't you think about subbing? Is it going to be the one that told me about my alma mater, Davidson College? Is it going to be the one that told me, hey, why don't you join History Bowl? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And push me to be the person I am today. Just the fact that you would think that this little piece of cloth is enough to stop this disease from killing one of those fantastic, wonderful human beings who are much better than I will ever be and than you will ever be, because it takes guts to be a teacher nowadays. The thought that you would think that this would protect them and that pretending that we're doing what we should be is enough, that's just wrong. It's not true. It's not Sarasotan. It's not what this school board has stood for before you were here, you were here, you were here, and you were here. And that will be here after you're all gone. The idea that we can just continue on pretending like this, it's foolish. It's foolish and it's wrong. So you know what? Screw the state. Screw the Commissioner of Education, and refuse to open up when it's dangerous. We'd like to talk about courage when we talk about our veterans. We like to talk about doing the right thing when we talk about ethics. But now is the time you have to do the right thing. Ignore them. Don't open up our schools.
Thank you. No clapping. You want to show support, flick your fingers. I can't snap them anymore. Wave your hands, right. Natasha, parents?
Natasha, I have questions from parents.
Oh, okay.
Okay. First question was, what happens if a
Pull the mic
teacher-
down so I can hear you.
Oh, I apologize. I am so
That's
sorry.
okay.
One of the questions was from a parent, what happens if a teacher tests positive? Does the whole class go under quarantine? Does the whole school shut down? How is the board going to address teachers who are thinking of early retirement based on what's going to happen with the plan? And the substitute teachers that are saying it's not worth us risking our lives. What's the plan going to be with the teacher shortage?
You were here this morning when we discussed this. You taped us.
I understand, but there was no answer, and there were some specific questions, and nobody got to answer those questions. Number 3, are you aware that Broward County just announced that they are basically saying, we are not opening brick and mortar, we are going to be online? They are not kneeling and bowing to government. Are our kids' life, the administration's life, the teacher's life, not important enough to take a stand and say, we're not going to do this, this is not right? Because it's our kids' lives, our teachers' lives, our administrators' lives, our communities' lives that are on the line. That's all.
Thank you. Chris Moon?
Hi, thank you all for the time and effort and hard work you're all putting into this effort. I so appreciate it. I'm a mom. This is my daughter. She's a Riverview High School student. And I know you've heard a lot from teachers, but I don't know if you've heard from a lot of the parents in the community. So I'm speaking on behalf of myself as a parent, my daughter as a student who is going to face a very challenging senior year, which is really sad. But what it really comes down to is the safety and well-being of the students, and of course the teachers and the community. I want to thank Mr. Robinson, who actually came out into the parking lot where we had the caravan and spoke to us personally. I really appreciate that. That meant a lot. So I know that there are members on this board that do care about what happens in this community. But some things that I would like for you to think about are, when you put in these restrictions, they need to be mandatory. Wearing face masks. I've heard a lot of discussion. There's a lot of people on both sides saying they may wear face masks. And without that protection for students and teachers, this whole thing's going to fall apart. It will only take, and I don't know, is the Department of Health person here? He's not here. Okay. It would only take one student in a classroom of 20 or 21 to be positive with COVID and bring it into the classroom and spread it to those other 19 unsuspecting students. So what happens then? That means that the rest of those students have to then go home and quarantine for 2 weeks. Then they are without learning for 2 weeks. They are without socialization for 2 weeks or maybe longer. Then there has to be contact tracing. Is there anything set up or budgeted for contact tracing when a student does test positive or if a teacher tests positive? I work with someone who is in charge of contact tracing for a very large company, and it's a nightmare because it's a domino effect. If one person's infected, they have to contact 10 other people that they may have been in touch with or in contact with, and then those 10 people and on and on. So I don't think it's realistic to open the schools now without a plan that allows for something like contact tracing, which I've heard nothing about. I'm also concerned about activities such as sports and band. My daughter's a Kilty. She would love to be able to go back, but it's not safe. What's it going to look like? How are sports going to be conducted? I've heard nothing about that. I'm just very concerned, and I think it's not a good decision. I appreciate the waiting till August 31st. That's a good first step, but there's still a lot more to be done. And I hope you will seriously consider it's not just teachers that are whining, and they're not whining. There are heroes. It's parents and students who maybe haven't taken the time or don't have the time and ability to come and speak before you in person. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would just like to make a comment. All of us have either grandchildren or children in the school system. So when you're talking to us as a board, you're talking to people who are directly impacted by the decisions that we make. So know that. Are there any amendments to the consent agenda?
Yes, the instructional classified personnel report had 2 addendums added after the agenda was published.
Okay, may I have a motion?
I move for approval of the consent agenda amended as presented.
I need a second.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. All those, please vote. Okay, Mr. Magic Man, not coming. There we go. And the motion passes 5-0. There were no items pulled for comment. So next is, may I have a motion on item number 41, please?
We haven't really discussed the resolution. We were going to discuss it in the workshop. Shirley, it was a resolution that Florida School Board Association developed a template for that condemns racism and affirms the district's commitment to an inclusive school environment for all. The resolution was discussed in an earlier work session, but not really. But
I could read it. I have it with.
Please.
Whereas the members of the the School Board of Sarasota County, as well as the Sarasota Public School staff, are saddened and outraged by recent events that demonstrate injustice and inequity. Whereas racism and hate have no place in our schools or our society, and we must protect the constitutional rights of every person who lives, works, and learns in our community. Whereas we must act to stop injustice based on race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, political affiliation, or zip code that harms and anguishes people who are our family, friends, neighbors, students, staff members, and fellow Americans. Whereas educational leaders are charged with ensuring that each of our children has equitable access to excellent educational opportunities. And whereas no student should confront bias, harassment, prejudice, or discrimination in our school or communities. Whereas we must ensure that the safe and enjoyable learning environments are established and maintained for all students in all communities. And whereas our district can be and will be a sanctuary of safety in our community and a beacon of light for the world as we build and strengthen trust for those we serve and we model the acceptance of all people. Therefore, be it resolved that we, the members of the School Board of Sarasota County and School District, stand steadfast in our commitment to foster an inclusive educational environment where every student, teacher, support professional, parent, and community member is treated with dignity and respect, as well as our commitment to continue fighting for justice and human and civil rights for all. So I move that, even though we didn't get a chance to discuss it at the workshop, I would like to move that we approve this.
Second.
Okay. On the discussion, Eric?
I applaud Shirley and Jane for bringing this resolution forward. However, I think a lot of the protests that they're out there complaining about, protesting about, is that there's been empty promises over the past multiple decades, and some people would say hundreds of years. And so while I applaud this resolution and I'll support this resolution no matter what, I would like to offer some concrete accountable things that the school district can do. And so I'd like to inject a clause that says, therefore, it be resolved, I'm trying to be more ready now. that the Sarasota County School Board, starting with the 21-22 budget cycle, implement an equitable budget based upon the needs of the students.
Would you accept that amendment?
I think it's implied that we want to do that, but this isn't about actions that we're taking, and I think we will work with our superintendent to make sure that our budget is equitable, and we've done that. I think we should be looking at who we're picking for a superintendent to make sure we're going to be equitable.
But can somebody else make a second, or does
I didn't know if it was a motion. I'll second.
Well, the language doesn't necessarily flow through here. I know what you're intending, and we all want to make sure that it's the funding is equitable.
Then you can vote no.
Well, the language that you're offering doesn't flow correctly in the sentence. You know, we talk about not surprises at the board table. If you had asked us to add something else to this, we would have. This is something that the Florida School Boards Association has been working with, and districts across the state have added. I would just ask that the language that you're giving me doesn't make a complete sentence. It doesn't actually fit. I know what you want to do, and I totally agree that we need to make sure that our funding is equitable. But equitable treatment isn't necessarily dollar for dollar either. And we've got a new superintendent coming on board. We have to make sure that that superintendent is going to be look at equitable things. We've got a budget that we're going to be voting on next week. It's up to us to make sure that those budgets are equitable. I just don't see how the language that you want to add just kind of jumbles this thing up. And I just would have appreciated something ahead of time so we could have had something that made sense than this. And I ask you to please not do these things at the board like this.
Okay, so you will not agree to amend the motion based on Eric?
Madam Chair, I made an amendment and I had a second.
They can vote on it, but it doesn't make sense, what he has said.
I made a motion and I have a valid second to amend it. And I have other amendments too.
Bridget.
In the interest of time, I am going to withdraw my motion that this be approved, because I do not want to have this thing holding up the work of our board, which we have right now to do, and that is to decide on who our superintendent is going to be and decide how we're going to open the board. Because if you want to nitpick something like this, that just asks that we treat those people who may have been mistreated in the past equitably, I mean, and not discriminate against them, which we have in our new policies. I am going to withdraw this.
Okay, so therefore you take back your second and you take back that.
But I do want to point some inaccuracies on Mrs. Brown's comments.
Okay, you're third. Bridget's been waiting and she's raising her hand. Bridget.
So thank you, and I shared, so I appreciate this being brought forward, and I know that we didn't have the opportunity to workshop it, and I think it is important because I know that the language was brought forward, and I believe there's absolute intent behind it. But I do think that, my takeaway is that, and I do agree, I think it's certainly an important topic, and I think actually it would benefit us to workshop it, and today we ran out of time. But I do think that there are elements that, and I support the language as it is, but I think it could be more meaningful if we are able to align it to actual deliverables, for lack of a better term, very similar to what Mr. Robinson said. And it's not so that this is not that it's not supported, but let's back it up with action and a plan, because I think that empty words and that's I think oftentimes what the frustration is, that the last thing we want to be is a dog and pony show. We want to be able to, and we are policymakers, we can actually make that difference and we can influence it. So I think that resolution and the intent of it is powerful and it has great meaning. I think we can go a step further, but I think that would be a good opportunity for us to workshop and talk about when we talk about our strategic plans and how we can align it up with budgetary actions as well. So, so hopefully we can do that in a very soon workshop.
Well, we can stay later tonight and workshop it with the rest of the products that we didn't finish this morning. We have to workshop after this. So, Mrs. Goodwin.
Well, it's twice that we try to bring something forward now. Once something from Hillsborough and this one, and I think this is by far the better resolution. But we didn't get to do it this morning, and I'm not at all sure that fits with this resolution. But I do think there is some work that we can do in a workshop to put together some type of an equity committee or something in the district to look at plans and projects and things that we can be involved with, because we talk about it and we say equity, and we talked about it with Booker and the VPA studio and theater this morning. So I think we'll bring it back and work on it and see where we are. So I'm fine with bringing it back a third time.
Mr. Robinson.
I do want to echo what I had said previously. I like the resolution, and I thanked Ms. Goodwin and Ms. Brown for bringing it forward. But Ms. Brown mentioned why I didn't mention this earlier. One, we have the sunshine, so we don't meet except at a meeting. It was on the workshop earlier, so I had planned on bringing up this at the workshop, which I thought that was the whole point of having it at the workshop, was so that board members could bring up issues or concerns that they had. As far as Eric Robinson bringing up equitable, that should not be a shock to anybody. I brought it up the very first meeting I ever had here. I don't know if Mitzi remembers that meeting. She's shaking her head yes. I brought it up when I was on the Financial Advisory Board when we were talking about the achievement gap. Nobody should be shocked or surprised that I brought this up. And if anybody's been following the news, these people are not looking... the protesters are not looking for us to just give a resolution. They're looking for concrete deliverables. They're looking for actions. They're looking for change. And so I think it's a wonderful resolution. I think FSBA did a wonderful job, Ms. Messina, Mr. Vogel, Mr. Richards, developing this resolution. I would sign the resolution if we didn't do the amendments, but I would like us to go through the amendments. But I understand and respect your decision to pull it back now. But hopefully we'll be able to workshop it, and I'll be talking about some of the other amendments so we can have deliverables, so we can show the people in our community that we do hear them, and that we're willing to make changes to address some of the inequities that have existed for decades, if not centuries. So, thank you.
Okay, this is up on our screens for voting, and I don't know how to get rid of it. Hey, just shut it down. Just hit the X up there, and it's gone.
It doesn't do it.
It's gone. The X on the top there. There you go.
Okay.
I got it. Everybody okay now? All right. You voted on a consent agenda, right? Yes. Under new business, may I have a motion on number 42?
I move that the school board approve the exchange agreement with Minnesota Beach Ranch Lands to exchange and purchase sites for the future schools in Northport as presented.
Do I have a second? There's no second on it. Here. I'll second it.
Can we have Mr. Dumas come and explain why we're doing this and perhaps answer some of the questions that were brought up this morning? This afternoon.
I can start as Jody comes up. At the last board meeting where this was being discussed, there were a couple of questions raised. One was about if there would have to be rezoning or anything done with respect to the property. And we've received that answer from the city of Northport, and they have told us, I'm writing to confirm that schools are a permitted use within the village zoning district that is in effect on the West Village's property. No rezone is required for a school to be built on the site. So that answered that question. The second issue that was raised was there was apparently a matter that was coming up before the City Commission on, I believe, July 2nd in Northport, and we got confirmation again from the city that they approved an ordinance unanimously updating the West Village's index map. So those were the two questions from last time. Now, I know the letter that got sent out questioned the initial conveyance. And let me say, I heard the speakers, and there's obviously individuals in West Villages who have issues with West Villages, and I don't know if they're right or wrong. I don't know what to make of that. That's really not my business, and I don't think it affects the board's decision on whether you want to sell and swap these properties. But one issue that was raised was somehow that the last purchase was somehow incorrect, or that there was a sleight of hand vis-a-vis the school board. Again, I'm not discussing any internal issues between West Villages and the developer, but the agreement that the board approved last time recognized within it that the developer had entered into an agreement with West Villages Improvement District whereby the owner had conveyed the donated land to West Villages. So we knew that. This was not something that was undisclosed to the school board. The school board paid ultimately $3.65 million in impact fee credits. That was based on the average appraised value of the land at $4.7 million. We were given a credit, if you will, of $1,050,000, said a good faith estimate of costs associated with the school board for preparing the donated land. So the land was worth, according to the appraisals, $4.7 million, and we paid through impact fee credits $3.65 million. Now, with respect to the new land that is being purchased, there have been 4 appraisals done on those lands, not 2. 2 have to be done for values of this size, but 4 were done. Those were averaged, and that's where the number comes from. So, I'm not an appraiser. I don't know what the land's worth. I only know what the appraisals have to say, and they are 2 separate parcels, because at first I believe we were looking at one parcel and then asked for another parcel, as I understand it. So we're giving up a site that was to be for K-8, and we're now getting a site for K-8 and a contiguous site for a high school. So that's how I understand it.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. When we were originally, as you know, started looking for a high school site to relieve Venice High School in terms of the growth they're seeing at that particular school. As we started down that path, our previous superintendent talked about the opportunity to then trade our current K-8 and build 2 sites contiguous to one another. As we move through that process, that's how we designed this deal, is so that the board could say, listen, we want to just buy the high school property, or we want to make the trade for the K-8 property. And so that's why that made sense as we move forward with appraisals, that we had everything laid out separately before you. So if you did not want to make the trade, you could just purchase the high school site, which at the end of the day is the real need in that area for additional land. So that's the reason it was structured that way. Let me just reiterate on what Art said. Mr. Hardy had said we did have more appraisals on these particular parcels than we have in the past because of some of the pricing issues. We wanted to make sure we were getting fair pricing. Remember, we're purchasing 3 separate properties across the district, one in North County, one one in Mid-County, one in South County, being the ones you're looking at today. As those appraisals started to come in, we wanted to make sure we had good numbers, so at the end of the day, we ended up with 4 appraisals here versus the 2 that we would normally get. There's also been mention of a 20-year restriction on a property that the school board's buying. I'll ask Mr. Hardy to interject, but that's typically what we'll see in these agreements, just because the developer, the homeowners in that area want to guarantee that we're not going to sell it for something then that we haven't, we've misrepresented what we're going to do with that property. So that's typical of the deals we're seeing. That we're signing elsewhere.
It's that, so that there's going to be a school in that area.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the restriction, so we can't flip it so somebody else can go in and buy
correct
houses. So in this case, we are selling the one that had the restriction on it, but back to the people,
correct,
back to the developer, but in essence, we're swapping those. So there will be a school site in that area.
And the other question that was raised was regarding the difference in acreage from appraisal to what we're actually going to purchase for, and that starts to happen. Again, appraisals are up front. Sometimes we don't have surveys done, we haven't narrowed in, and as contracts start to develop, when there's things still laying out there, like who's going to build the road, who's going to put the infrastructure in, those come in at a later date, and that's where Mr. Hardy and Jeff Grebe and his team, they kind of narrow that in for us so that contracts can change as we get closer and we narrow in those details. At the end of the day, we don't want to ever have the school board hanging out there to have it build a road. So we feel confident where we are with this agreement, this contract, and that's what's presented before you today.
Right, and one last thing, this starts the contractual process, but it does not close the deal. We have 180 days to do due diligence on this. This specifically contemplates there will be further agreements, a big one, specifically including the access road, which we will make sure is built, or that we have money to build it, so that we won't be paying, the school board won't be paying to build that road. If that, I'm confident that will be put in place, but if it isn't, then it would be my advice to you to exercise your rights during that 180 days and get out of the contract. But so this is the beginning of the process.
Mr. Robinson.
Thank you. So you did talk about the appraisals, but did we, of our 4 appraisals, get one that had both sites together, or did we get 4 appraisals for each individual parcel?
We kept the appraisals apples to apples. They were all compared so we could compare them. So no, they're all on separate. So we've appraised 3 separate parcels, the one we currently own and the 2 new parcels, being one being the high school site and one being the new K-8 site.
But so you appraised 3 different parcels. Why didn't you at least do a couple of appraisals of both the 2 sites together? Because it stands to reason that one 150-acre site is worth less than 2 75-acre sites.
Well, what I described earlier is the reason we did not do that is to give you the option at the end of the day, if the board did not want to do the trade, we could still buy the high school site.
But you understand the issue, Jody, right?
If the board would like us to go reappraise those and reappraise them as one larger parcel, we certainly can go back and pay to have 2 more appraisals done. I mean, every one of these appraisals costs us money, so obviously we want to be judicious with money also. So it's not part of our normal process. We didn't appraise it as a larger piece of property.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Thank you. I am conflicted on this one still, but I think for a couple reasons. Certainly, I'm going to be consistent with some of the discussions we had earlier today with capital, and I understand purchasing property is something in long-range planning. But as we move ahead, that's just one. There's just been some issues, and I'm concerned. 2. The question I guess I have is, from the evaluation for the appraisals, the one that is being purchased, the one we are selling, was the educational use included on all 4 of those appraisals?
So I apologize, I didn't have a chance to pull all of them. I did pull the one of the appraisals up and took a look at it, and it was appraised at highest and best use, and I have not seen anything in here in terms of that analysis that devalues it for the restriction on the property. So I would say let me get back to you on the rest of them, but I did not see it in this particular appraisal, which is AAG.
Because my biggest concern would certainly be, and I don't have, if Go ahead.
So let me just read the appraisal. So on our current site, our existing K8 site, and this is broken down per acre, and I'm not going to name the names of the appraisals, but they range from 125,000 an acre, 115,000 an acre, 117,000 an acre, and 119,000 an acre. So the appraisals are relatively tight, and that's 4 independent companies on that particular piece of property that we own.
So that's where it's the, I understand we have 4 appraisers, so I'm doing the sale, what we're selling, and then were there any limitations to the market value for the ones that we're buying? Is it, at least as it's been indicated there, that it's different? That one has a restriction for the educational use?
So, Ms. Ziegler, I would not want to say unless I went back through the appraisals and they're 60 some odd pages long and I'd have a chance to do that. So
well, I don't know what else you've been doing, but no, I'm kidding. But truly, that's my worry. That if that's a fair concern that's brought up, and if there's a valuation difference, I could see that could cause a problem. And I would certainly want to make sure if we did 4 appraisals, that would be 12, right? 12. I mean, I just want to make sure what we're selling is being appraised in the same manner and or listed under than what we're buying.
Jody,
I don't know if you can speak to that.
Do you have the amount of the appraisal? Because it's my recollection, but I don't want to say this because I don't have the figures in front of me, that the parcel we're selling is appraised higher than what we bought it for a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. We're around, well, the average appraisal puts our property at, the existing K8 site's about 7.1 when you average all the appraisals.
Right, and we paid we paid 3.6, but it was appraised at 4.7. So, I mean, that shows, and that was in
We're making money on it.
2016.
I hate to keep pushing.
So that's
to keep kicking this particular purchase off.
That's in a couple of years, 3.5 years. It's gone up considerably in value. So that leads me to believe this was an apples to apples and it wasn't being devalued. But I don't know that without looking at it.
Again, and I hate to be, I'm not purposely trying to delay this particular purchase or moving forward. But I would like, these are valid questions that I think unless they're, I would move that we table it again to ensure we have that answer.
Second.
I'm sorry, yeah.
I have 2 people that would still want to speak. Jane? Mrs. Goodwin. Sorry.
Thank you. Well, I have several concerns, and I have really had a lot on my plate lately. I did speak to John Mizell and David Fernstrom, and they were very delightful in trying to explain to me, and I'm not sure that I'm an appraiser or in the business of real estate. One of the things that I was worried about, I did drive by as close as I could get to the property. It's a great location, the new property, because I think that's where a lot of development will be down the River Road, not the east, but the west side. But my concern is that on the original property that we're selling now, we're selling it, and is it as apples for apples in that the developer will use it for commercial property, which I think is valued at more money than education. Is that correct?
Well, the way these are valued is at highest and best use. And like I said, I only had a chance to pull one up in between the meeting, but it is valued at the highest and best use of the appraisal process. And that includes anything that's authorized in the zoning of West Villages would be the highest and best use of that particular property. And that's the way ours is currently valued in this particular appraisal I have in front of me.
So what is, you don't know exactly what the highest and best use is. It was residential when we bought it. And a commercial in that location has got to be probably the greatest property, or one of the best properties in the whole of West Villages right now. It's just across the street from the ball field.
So let me read. It says financially feasible, maximally productive uses. As discussed, the subject can physically and illegally support residential units along with commercial and non-residential uses consistent with the zoning and future land use in West Villages. That's our property and how this appraisal was done.
Mrs. Brown.
And, I think there are some unanswered questions, and Jody, you've had your hands full. You definitely have. And you know, I think we ought to explain to the people why we're wanting to exchange this property for the other property. I mean, some of us know, but there's other people that are watching. Could you explain why we're wanting to do this? Why isn't it's near the ball field, and we're saying that that's not a good place for a school now because of the traffic?
No, I don't think we're saying that at all. I think again, the way we started this process was on the previous superintendent, so I know the conversation I was involved with when this all started. So, again, we went looking for a high school site to relieve the growth we're seeing at Venice High School. That pushed us down into the West Villages because, as Ms. Goodwin just said, we think we got a great location in the new properties. It puts us right in where the development's going to happen. We got great access with the new Minnesota Beach Road coming across, so we like that area. As we started looking at that property, our previous superintendent thought it would be a good idea to also look at having two properties contiguous to one another so that we could do some things like share bus loops. So if we're going to build a school, let's build it so we can save some money and share some services. Can the facilities at one support the facilities at another? And so we've not had the opportunity to do that before as a district. It seemed like it might be the right thing to do. I think at that particular time, the thought was the new stadium had just gone up. We might see some real value increase in our current property, which would help us purchasing the two new properties we're looking at now. So that's really why we headed in that direction. And again, why we continue to head in that direction with the praised as you see them today, so that the board will have options down the road to say, hey, listen, we don't want to do that exchange. We'll keep our K-8 site. We just want to buy the high school site. This structured this way gives you that option if you'd like to.
Well, I'm thinking the value has, if you paid 3.6, it's at 7.2 now, it might make sense to do that, especially because, you know, maybe it was our superintendent that discussed that there might be some issues with the traffic and whatnot if a game is letting out when school is letting out, and there was some concern about the additional traffic that might be around the school during spring training time, which might cause us problems, and that it might be perhaps even advantageous for us to take that other site now, whereas this site might be better for other people, and maybe it might not be as good for a school right now with the ballpark next door.
I think that was the line of thinking and why we moved in this direction originally. I agree with you.
So you're talking about the new property?
The old property. Yeah. So
property,
you know, I'm you know, more comfortable with this, with your understanding of this. But you know, if it's not going to hurt us to wait till the next meeting again, if.
It certainly would not. I guess what I would like direction from you on is, do you want us to go out and get more appraisals on the other property? That would be the question. I don't want to bring it back in front of you with the same thing again.
I don't know that I want more appraisals. I think there were some questions that were asked about the appraisals we have. And, you know, because the appraisals are going to cost us quite a bit of money.
Well, I would also point out that this is a contract, which means you don't just get to decide by yourself. You can, of course, decide no, but to say yes requires two parties. So this is the contract that the other side has agreed to. If you direct us to go get more information, do more work, bring you back something different, we can certainly do that, but we can't guarantee that the other side will agree with, you know, the seller/buyer, because we're both buyers and sellers in this. So I'm just telling you, it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street.
I will call on you as soon as I speak. I don't have a problem with this. I see the value of having a high school and an elementary school K together, because I watched Sarasota High, how they tutored the kids at Alta Vista. I've watched Venice tutoring the kids in Venice Elementary. I mean, it's a natural, and I'm so grateful that we have the opportunity to have this much land that we can actually build two schools close to each other like that. So I think it's a win-win for us. I didn't understand the last delay, and I don't understand this one either, because there's never been a question in my mind. Any negotiating has to be done with the city of Northport, not us. And what I'm hearing is that there's a problem between some people that live in the West Villages area and they don't want the property sold. They want to keep the school there because they're afraid that something else might be put in there that they don't like. So that's not our responsibility. You can raise your hands all you want. That's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to get a piece of property that's good for the school system. And I remember trying to get property in Northport before, and because of the sheeted lots, we can't find this much property. We are lucky to have this much property to be able to buy for a K through 12 school. So I'm in favor of doing it. Bridget?
For clarification, I don't particularly have an issue with the changing of purchase, the transaction of the direction we're going. I think there are questions about the appraisals, ensuring that they are, in fact, the apples to apples. I don't, to be fair, I know that everyone's time's been a little focused on reopening, but this is still significant. We can't take it lightly. That's why I said I'd rather just make sure we understand that. To say directionally, having it keep coming back and then going to delay, I also don't know that that's a good use of time either. As far as I don't know if it makes sense until we get that one question answered, if we need another appraisal or not, but I mean, perhaps that's a better way to look at it. If we want another appraisal, and then that way we're not going back and forth. If that's the decision that wants to be made, then I'm fine with that. I think we need to, my motion is to table it, to get the questions answered, and then if there needs to be a second motion regarding an additional appraisal, then that's.
What questions, Bridget?
I just explained as far as the sell and are the appraisals used apples to apples, the one that we're selling and then the one we're buying, as far as the use, the highest fair market value is what to use is the one contract. I want to make sure that the one we're selling was appraised with the same language as the ones we're buying, not flip-flop.
The one I understand,
because it would have a
Jody,
financial negative. It could be, if it's not apples to apples, it could. I just want that confirmed. Do you follow me?
I do. Let me reiterate what Mr. Hardy had said, though. If we feel that the appraisals need to change and we have our appraisals redone and the value of the properties come down, we still have to renegotiate with West Villages. I will tell you, we've been negotiating with them for a while, and that's one of the reasons we've got more appraisals than we normally have, because they felt the value of the land they owned was higher than we thought it was. That's how you got the appraisals you have in front of you. I'm not sure that we would, it's just a negotiation we have to have. I'm not sure we'd come back with an agreement for you, but we could try.
So do you feel that the appraisals are a good appraisal?
Absolutely. I mean, we've got 4 separate appraisals from reputable companies who know how to appraise commercial properties. I am not an appraisal expert, and I certainly don't want to explain to you that I am. I think that if you still have questions, you want to table it, what we would do is I'd ask Mr. Hardy to help us with an appraisal expert who would go through every appraisal and see if there are any inconsistencies that they could identify with more expertise than I have, and then bring that back to you if that's what you would like us to do.
See, in my mind, here we go again. I trust you, and you trust the appraisals. Jane?
Well, I trust him, but I'm not ready to vote on this.
Well, and again, please don't, it's not you trust in Jody or not.
Right.
There's been a lot of people involved in the deal, too.
But it's not about, trusting.
Please,
it's not
I
about
don't feel
trusting.
like that either. So again, it's certainly up to you. If you want us to do that, my suggestion would be, and let me ask Art, Mr. Hardy, I think that would be the way we proceed, is have somebody come in who has not looked at this deal yet, look at the appraisals we got and see if there are any inconsistencies in terms of the evaluations were done. Mr. Hardy, I think that would be the way forward.
I think we should certainly do that rather than, or at least before, spending time and money to get another appraisal. Because every appraisal will come in differently. We have 4 appraisals. None of them are exactly the same. That's just because it's not an exact science. So I don't think we should start all over again. If the point is to make the board comfortable that the assumptions in the appraisals are all similar, then we can do that. But I wouldn't suggest getting yet another appraisal at this point.
I just need to be comfortable with it, and I don't understand everything because my mind has been on other things, and I don't think that's fair to this transaction. Therefore, I am not going to vote in favor of this at this time.
So we have a motion on the floor to table it. So if you...
We're waiting for her to call the question.
call the question?
For a non-debatable motion.
So,
Can't call the question, you have to call.
I call the question.
I'll second that.
I actually called the question earlier.
Hold
You
on,
said
let's vote on, who wants to call the question? Please say aye.
Aye. Can we
Okay.
vote on the motion to table?
Motion to table.
It's a motion to table. I have to, since he called the question. So now we're voting on the motion to table.
Aye.
Aye. So that's 5. So it's tabled. Okay, and do you think you can bring this back to us next month?
Absolutely. We'll get on it right away, and we'll get it evaluated and get it back on the board agenda as soon as possible.
Okay. I have to take this off to do this. All right, next, this is the format for selecting a superintendent. As we address the selection of our superintendent, this board will make a decision of great magnitude. Our decision today will have a direct impact on the continued success of Sarasota County School District. We have an elected duty to represent the public. More importantly, our decision will impact the lives and education of almost 44,000 young people and over 5,700 employees. With that in mind, our discussion should be open, candid, and guided by what's best for the students and taxpayers we all serve. To start today, I'll review the entire superintendent selection process. Then the board will discuss and vote. Then I will provide an overview of the next steps after our selection is made this evening. First, a review of the selection process that has followed. The board's discussion began in November 2019 when the board reached a mutual separation agreement with Superintendent Todd Bowden. The board hired Mitzi Corcoran to act as superintendent while we conducted a formal search for our next permanent superintendent. In February 2020, the board approved the hiring of FSBA as our superintendent search committee. 10 workshops or meetings were held from February until now, July 20th, where the superintendent search was an advertised agenda item. A survey questionnaire was administered between March 12th and April 3, garnering 8,000 pieces of input and responses. Advertisements ran from April 27th to May 29th on multiple state and national platforms. A Citizens Advisory Committee comprised of 25 members convened on 3 occasions. And I thank the people that are here today from the committee. There's 2 of you I see that were on the, 3 of you that were on the committee. At the board meeting on June 23rd, 5 finalists were invited to come to our county for face-to-face interviews. These interviews were held on July 1st and 2nd. The July 1 school board interviews were held publicly and aired live on the Education Channel and the district YouTube, as well as were archived and able to be viewed throughout the weekend and up until now. On July 1, a modified community Meet the Candidates was held via the Education Channel and our YouTube channel. Citizens submitted questions throughout the day, which were asked by one of our FSBA consultants to the finalists. Individual board members' interviews with each finalist were held on July 2nd throughout the day. That brings us to this meeting today and vote. We will do a round robin of each board member speaking, then I will follow with 2 and 3 rounds of comments if needed, until all board members have shared all their comments. I'd like you to limit your comments to 5 minutes, please, and I will try and time you based on my time, a little timer down there. Okay, and I will start by Mrs. Goodwin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to just say again a great big thanks to FSBA, Andrea, John, Bill, for a great job done. I know I'm a little prejudiced, but I think that you have done an exemplary job, and it was just such a seamless transparent and fluid and flowing search. I think that our applicants were very pleased and happy. I think our school district was pleased. Of course, our school district is excellent. So, you had a lot of great people here to work with. I must say that. And thank you, Mitzi. I know how much hard work you did with organizing all of this. It did not go unnoticed. I'm going to speak today on who I hope will become our next superintendent. I'm very excited to talk about him, and that is Dr. Brennan W. Asplin III. Brennan Asplin came to us 3 years ago and was a finalist for superintendent. And I think he has really seasoned and developed beautifully in the last 3 years. He's gotten his doctorate degree. He has more experience as being the #1 school district in the state, St. Johns County, where he is the academic leader. But he, to me, embeds in all of the things that we have loved about superintendents in the past. He is a great listener. He's kind, and he wants to be in Sarasota County. He really wants to come here and spend the rest of his career. And he's not looking at Sarasota County as a stepping stone to another area. I think his vision and his goals are in line with what we'd want. When I was interviewing him the first day of the interview session, and I talked to him about instruction, his face lit up because that's what he's about. We are an instructional district. We take what we do in instruction very seriously, and I think he does as well. We talked a bit about closing the achievement gap, opportunity gap in Hispanic and Black children. And we talked about many of the things that I think he would do if he were here. In looking at the 5 candidates, I'd like to hire them all. They're all terrific candidates, but I think Brennan stood out above the rest. As he approached the school district on the first day and parked his car, he went over and spoke to police officers that were standing out in the parking lot getting the buses ready to go. He sent numerous thank you notes to the bus driver that was with him that day, to members of our staff, and was so personable and so thoughtful in all of his reflections on his time here. I know a number of people in St. Johns County. Some are school board members. Some are other people that I have found out about and gotten to know as a result of really asking some questions of people around the state. And in every case, the answer that I got was that he is a wonderful person to work with. And I just feel that he would be the kind of a leader who could come to Sarasota County, would get involved with the community. He wants to be involved with faith-based business, schools, students, and other parts of our district, and wants to do the kind of job that he would think would elevate this district further. And those are the kinds of things that I am looking for. I'm looking for someone who has grace, who has kindness, who has trustworthy, and is someone that in a very short period of time can build that trust with our community. The other 4 candidates were terrific, and I wish them well. And of course, others may have some things to say about other people, and I understand that. But as far as I am concerned, my #1 candidate for superintendent is Brennan Asplin.
Thank you, Carol. Mr. Robinson?
Yeah, I agree with you, Jane. Mr. Asplin was phenomenal. Who wouldn't want somebody from #1 school district in the state? Unlike Ms. Goodwin, though, I've got mine narrowed down to 2, and I look forward to hearing from my fellow board members about how they feel. I think the other one I really liked was Maria Squerdo. I think, and when you look at St. John's and you look at the socioeconomics of St. John's, it's kind of easy to understand why they're an A. But when I found out that Miami-Dade County was an A, I was a little shocked. And then to hear, I would have thought that Miami-Dade County would have, I don't know, 10, 20 F schools. And to hear that, I know Ms. Zucker had an issue about whether it was 0 or 1, be that as it may, it leads me to believe that she has the ability to tackle the achievement gap issue that we've all been talking about. It's not hard to close the achievement gap in St. Augustine, but to do it in Dade County, that's rather phenomenal. And when you talk to Maria and you're around her, it's almost infectious. She's so dynamic. They both have each individual strengths. I think Mr. Asplin would be able to bring back some of the innovativeness that he's had at St. Johns County. And we talked about some of the different things that they do. And we know that it's successful because it's the district that we're always talking about wanting to be like. And so have somebody with the inside knowledge of St. John's to help us achieve that goal. And I think we have that. I think we are actually the #1 school district in the state. And I think we have the potential to do it. The question is which one can help us do that the best? And so I look forward to hearing from my other board members and their comments and their input to help guide me in my decision. But I have the feeling that regardless of which one, I'm fine with picking either one, but I'm looking for direction from my other fellow board members. Thank you.
Mrs. Ziegler?
Thank you. Well, first, I have to say that it's wild, arguably most important position in our county. I would say it is the most, is the superintendent, and picking the selection of it is the board's most important role. And I find it interesting, or I don't know what the right word is, that it has been overlooked to a certain degree from a public standpoint because there's such a focus and concern on reopening and how we handle the uncertainty of this pandemic. However, with that said, I know even as we approached into this, there was a concern around, will we be able to get a good set of candidates? Who's going to be willing to leave their district? And a myriad of things. And so I do want to applaud the FSBA and thank you you guys did a great job. I think you guys were quick on your feet and innovative, and I am very, very pleased with all 5 finalists. I think 2 rose to the top for me, which is certain Dr. Asplin and Miss I'm gonna mess up her name. I knew I was gonna do that. It was Guerrero. And so, to me, I want to hear back from my other colleagues as well, because lessons learned of how things went in prior superintendent search. I want us to work together and hear all of the things that you liked and things that you liked about the other one. I think that's a better way to stay positive. But for me, I'll start with, I think that St. John's has always been our rival as #1 in the state, and it's just something I've heard since being in this community, and it's constantly addressed. And I think Dr. Asplin brings a lot of a wealth of knowledge. He's genuine, he's authentic, he's got a calm demeanor. It's interesting, this district has gone through a lot of, for lack of a better term, turmoil over the last couple of years, and so a sense of calm is certainly what I believe many people are seeking, and I believe that is important too. I also find ourselves facing one of the most challenging circumstances I would think anyone in education has ever seen, and that takes a lot of innovation and courage and thinking outside the box and inspiration. I think it's interesting when you look at the two. They're very diverse and they're very different, but I think both would do a great job leading our district. My big thing is, I know that there is some concerns about, I have read in our newspaper something about the word change agent, and I feel like that typically, maybe that's my perception, but sometimes that's seen as a negative connotation, and I don't believe it is. But if there's a time we have to adapt more than ever, it's now, if you hinge off the conversation we just had and the unknowns, and having someone that has faced significant logistics with a county the size of Miami-Dade, I think that brings a lot of opportunity for us as well. So I think both bring a lot to the table, and I too look forward to hearing what my other board members think.
Shirley?
I'm going to throw another name out there. And, I was looking at all of the candidates, and when I was going back over them after I had had the interviews and watched the interviews, I came away, Mr. Asplin, I chose him 3 years ago, and if I could have only convinced the rest of my board members to go with me. But and he's even a better candidate than he was then. He's got a PhD now. He's got the experience of having to go through some of this COVID changes like that. But I'm just not sure if he's that he holds up to the dynamics of some of the other candidates we have, because that they don't have enough poverty and minority numbers to compare to us. I was looking at Peter Licata, because when you look at Peter Licata in Palm Beach County, the district that he had was 65,000 students versus our 43, and their poverty rate that he had, or we go by free and reduced lunch, they had a higher rate. They had 62% versus our 45%, and the minority population in there was 66% versus our 38%. So they had a higher minority population, but when you look at the points they scored 4 points higher than we did on those numbers. So they did things, or he did things in his district to raise that. But when I asked him about closing the achievement gap, he said that's not his goal. It's not his goal to close the achievement gap. His goal is to raise the bottom level up. He said, because you can't just close the achievement gap by not paying attention to the top. He said, because we've got to give all of those students the opportunity. So rather than talking about closing achievement gap, raise the level for all of our students. One of the ways he was doing that was making sure they graduated college and career ready. And he set up these academies like we did also. But he also served on a board that included the business leaders, chambers of commerce, the college presidents, so that they had ways of working between them, all of them together. He represented the whole county on that board, to have those options and those opportunities out there for those students. And that's what I really liked. And in talking with the people who recommended him, the current superintendent said, Dr. Licata is a passionate leader with the ability to bring people together. He has the knowledge, disposition, and experience to serve as your next superintendent. The board chair said he successfully defended the board in decisions to disapprove charter contracts. His view on charters were, if you're going to have a charter in our school district, tell us what you're going to do differently. What are you going to add to this? Because he also works with a lot of magnet schools, because that was another thing that they felt that they needed to do, offer something different in their district to help bring up the levels up. And I think he brought a lot of them into some of the minority districts with those magnet schools. In fact, he was, in 2017, was given the Magnet Schools of America National District of the Year Award for some of the magnet schools that he brought in there. The previous superintendent also was supportive of him, and he said that he's a dynamic leader and his focus is on all students, and that he brought in those 100 new programs that he was talking about. And he also got an $11.6 million federal grant to help with that college and career readiness that he did. He also was one of the lead persons that went out in the community to pass the referendum. And I can definitely see him going out there, meeting with our business leaders, encouraging them and getting them excited about supporting us in our referendum. I'm also excited about, the Maria Esquero from Miami, but I heard that her daughter, I can understand too, she's a junior, she's staying behind, but I want to make sure that there's somebody that's 100% totally committed to our schools. And on his letter of his closing comments that he shared with us, he said, I will be committed to all stakeholders of Sarasota County, and please be assured that for me, this is not a stepping stone, but my capstone. That meant something to me, too. And he also was very honest when we asked, what is a mistake you've made and what have you learned from that? And his mistake was, he said that he worked with the district and they came up with a great plan when they had a new school and they had to do redistricting, and they were so excited and they brought it out to the public, and the public was very upset with him because they didn't get input. So he learned in that. He said he learned his lesson, that he knows that if we're going to be making changes, we need to go out to the public and get that input too. So he wants to bring inclusiveness. I think that he brings the right amount of excitement to the district, that he wants to make some changes. Maybe not too dynamic as some of the other people that we've looked at, and maybe not as laid back as some of the others. But I think I'd like to see a little change, a little moving forward with somebody who's going to listen to all the stakeholders and bring them in. And that is why, after careful deliberation and going over all of the stuff over the weekend and everything, I ended up picking Mr. Licata from Palm Beach.
Okay. My choice is Brennan Ashburn. And the reason I choose him is because of his dedication, commitment, his excitement about academics, and the fact that he's just made me feel great. And after reading his resume, I want to read the closing statement of his. I believe effective leaders give credit and take responsibility. As you know, my style is quiet and pensive, not flashy. I am a passionate, progressive, and innovative thinker, known as a uniter of people and problem solver with proven leadership. I can assure you that I am up to the challenge to propel Sarasota County Schools to the highest levels of performances, and I want to serve with you, be your superintendent. For a man to come back twice after being told no, and to have the credentials that he does and the demeanor he has, I know that he will be here for the rest of his career. He's also one who, I asked him something point blank, and most people would have taken offense at this. I asked him if he was a holy roller. And he said, no, well, let me explain my background and why you might have gotten that impression. And he proceeded to tell me where he came from, how he was born, how he grew up, what he did in Seminole. And Seminole is a perfect example of Sarasota County. So he's had the experience in Seminole of both the high and the low end students. I think he's had more experience, and I like the fact that he's humble. He calls himself a servant leader. And that's what I like about him. He's more about the community, staff, teachers. I heard him talk about children, having students on the council. He's the only one that I heard talk about having students as part of his council. And going out and talking to the churches, because the churches is where we have separation of church and state, but the churches is where you find a lot of our people and a lot of our kids go to church. And this is one of his places where he wants to do. I know that when he first started his interview on television, he sort of had a brain freeze, and that some people might have seen that and thought down of it, but I didn't, because as I was running for school board my first time, I stood up to speak, and there was not a word or thought in my brain. And I sat down. I said, I'm sorry, I don't have anything to say. And I sat down. So him having this little pause where he had a brain freeze, I think makes him human. It's more human to be like that than to be a robot and be constantly on. I see him as a really successful leader for the community, leader for the school system. I would not, we have all 5 good candidates, so I'm trying to choose how I talk, which is really hard for me because I'm used to just saying it. We have 5 really good candidates, but some of our candidates have gone through this Chiefs for Change program, and that's all about charter schools. And some people play golf with one of the charter schools, Azar. He play golf with him. I mean, those people I cannot take because I am all about public education, and so is Brennan Ashland. And that's why I choose Brennan Ashland. Now we can go around again because that's what we have to do until we can try and get
I'd like to say something about Maria Sciardo. I think she's delightful. I think she was wonderful. She was definitely in my top 2 until she told me that she would not be bringing her husband or daughter for a couple of years. And that was a non-starter for me because I think that we need a commitment superintendent that will be here, will be involved in the community, but will have family along with he or she. And that was a big non-starter for me. I also like Keith Oswald. I didn't think that he interviewed as well as I would have hoped he would have, but he is probably the giant in that district. I know an awful lot about Palm Beach County because I have many friends in Palm Beach, and I'm on the phone or hear from them frequently. And Keith is the deputy superintendent, and he has done it all. And he is a very humble man as well, but he is a giant. A few weeks ago, when the superintendent tried to remove him as deputy, for no good reason, I might add, and there was conjecture as to why that took place at that time, about 25 community leaders from Palm Beach came to the school board meeting and spoke on his behalf. But he doesn't talk about things like that, so he's really self-effacing, and you know, I wish him the very best because I really, really can see him as a superintendent. But looking back again at Brennan Asplin, right after he left here, he actually it was before he came here. When was he here? When did we do this? Oh yeah, it was right after he left. Excuse me, July the 6th. He sent us the return to school options, 1 page, and it says option 1, 2, 3, 4, level of community spread of COVID, instructional model to be used in response. And that really tells me an awful lot. I mean, that says a great deal, volumes to me. And I thought, well, this is really easy to understand. But he's a person who is a giant in terms of technology and rolling up his sleeves and working alongside his staff. He's as I said, he's a great father of adult children and a grandfather, and he's from North Fort Myers and really wants to be in Sarasota County, and that speaks volumes to me because I think that attitude coming in is a great deal. And Dr. Asplin is a remarkable man, and I think we'd be lucky to have him as our superintendent.
Eric?
I said when we initially went around that I had 2 people, and I wanted to listen to my fellow board members, so I guess my list is now narrowed down to 1. Mr. Asplin. For the record, I didn't ask anybody what their religious persuasion is or who they played golf with, but I think both of them are going to be great people. So I have no problem to coalesce around Brennan Asplin, so we can try and get as many votes as possible for one person.
Bridget?
I know that, like I said, I agree, and I think that at the end of the day, I felt that we were going to be able to have a good leader either way. And while I think there's a lot of, and there are certain boundaries where I didn't ask certain questions. I just really went to what I really thought they could bring to this district and how they could move us ahead. I think Dr. Asplin certainly could do that. And if that is, I want the incoming superintendent to have a positive momentum forward and see the support of the community, because we need to get moving immediately. So I will be in support of Dr. Asplin as well.
Shirley.
Well, the last time we had a vote on the superintendent, it was 4-1, and I was on the opposite side. And it appears like I'm here again. And I hope I don't have to say I told you so 3 years from now.
No.
But I appreciate all of our candidates. Mr. LaCava had a lot of experience in HR, and we need some help there. We need a lot of, and everyone brought something to the table, and we all thought, somebody brought us, but if we're going to coalesce, and I think that's what we need to do. I mean, we need to be all supportive of whoever we pick, and I picked him 3 years ago, and I will pick him again, and if I don't think he's going to be good enough out in the business community telling us what we need, to get the referendum going, I'll go out there and talk to the business community, and I'll do what we can to make this successful change. And I truly appreciated all you've offered, Mr. Licata, but I'm going to go for the good of the board and work with y'all and go with Mr. Asplin.
All right. You're clapping hands back there. Well, thank you all. I mean,
So,
that was a
I'll
good
make
discussion. Would somebody make a motion for me, please?
I move for selection of a superintendent, the board. See, we're doing this too soon.
The board offer the position of superintendent of schools
to Dr. Brennan Asplin III and authorize the chair and council to begin contract negotiations.
Second.
Okay. Please vote. Do you have your vote up?
It's going to be roll call, all in favor.
Want to do roll call? Sure.
Well, or whatever.
Mine was up.
Oh, mine's up too. That's all right.
Oh.
Yeah, mine said muy escuero.
So does mine.
Okay, it's up.
Mine says John Smith.
All right, all those in favor?
No, I got it.
Aye.
We're kidding.
I don't know what.
5-0.
Oh, its vote is 5-0. Hey.
Mr.
Excuse
Asplin,
me
I
while
know
I
you're
talk to
watching.
him.
Oh, you've got him.
Hi, Dr. Asplin.
Put him on the speaker.
I'm gonna put you on speaker.
Okay, thank
You have to put that on speaker.
I'm putting it on speaker. Like this? Wait a minute.
Oh, it is on speaker.
It's on speaker. I know what you're talking about. Congratulations, and I am very happy. We all are. We're all smiles here. Yay!
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. I want to say I'm very humbled. I'm very humbled and I'm honored to be selected. I really appreciate that. I thank you so much, and I do sincerely look forward to working with each of you on the board. I can't wait to get down there and start working with you. And I heard you say something about FSBA and the interview process, and if I could, I just want to say thank you to them as well. They ran a very good process, and you in Sarasota County also, I think, ran a very good interview process, and I know I was thankful and impressed by the people that I met there and the hospitality that you showed and the passion and dedication of the employees that were there, and it was just impressive. And as you know, you all have heard me in the interviews that I think, Sarasota County has unlimited potential, and it's because of the people there and the teachers and the administrators and the community and the parents. And I honestly can't wait to get down there. I look forward to moving down to Sarasota. And
When will that be?
Tomorrow.
We can talk
That was Jane.
Obviously, I'll talk to our
The boss.
superintendent here in St. John's, and
We're approving the contract on the 23rd. He can be here at 5 o'clock.
okay, that's right. And I do
Welcome.
like talking about St. John's.
No pressure, no pressure line.
My gratitude to St. John's and the people here, they have been phenomenal as well. But I need to talk to, obviously, our superintendent and decide that. But I really look forward to moving down it. And as you probably can tell, I'm just excited. I'm excited. I want to meet everybody. I want to go down there and get started and move us along down there in Sarasota. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, and congratulations to you. I can hear everyone.
Thank you very much.
Do you hear them clapping for you?
Yes, I can hear that. That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll talk with you soon.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, now we get to stuff.
Oh my God, now I feel like,
No, now we get to talk about school reopening.
Unless do you want to do a brief recess?
You want one?
Should we do a brief recess?
okay,
Madam Chair, can we do a brief 5-minute recess?
yes, 5-minute recess.
Thank you.
Five-minute recess, and then we have to go back to finish up this morning. Yes, we're going back. This is such an exciting time in our lives. I appreciate everyone wanting to talk about it. But I'm sure
Reopening.
that we'd love to finish the reopening workshop that we started this morning and delayed until now because of what needed to be done. What the heck? Okay.
Okay, so do you want us to just kind of pick up where we left off, or do you want us to just kind of
No, I guess you should
go
pick
through?
up where you left off.
Okay.
Is that all right with everyone?
I think maybe a quick overview until we get there, or do you, all right, never mind.
It's not a quick overview. They've
All
done
right.
a lot already this morning.
So, so basically what's up on the PowerPoint are the school board policy decisions. So on July 2nd, when we met with you, we had left you with some areas that we were going to need direction on. These are pretty quick ones that are up on there right now. There's outside rentals. That's kind of a new one. We didn't actually bring it up on the 2nd. I sent it to you in a follow-up email. The plan was to open our schools, basically open everything back up as of yesterday. However, based on the spikes that have occurred, we're beginning to wonder if we need to put a hold on our outside rentals and the use of our facilities, particularly because of the burden that it places on our custodial staff. So, Jody, do you want to mention?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Mitzi. One of the things that we had concerns about moving forward is that having a lot of people on our campuses as we're prepping to start school, our people get really nervous about going in and having to clean after them and having all these people on campus. So we made a decision to kind of put a hold on rentals. We had opened. There were a lot of rentals in there scheduled, booked for after the 13th when we came back, which is the date we had set. We then said, well, let's put a hold on anything new. Let's put a hold on what we can until we get in front of you and have conversations about what you feel is the best course of action for us to take in terms of rentals. You know what the amazing thing is, there are a lot of rentals already in our system, and what we found is specifically like at Riverview High School, there were a number of rentals in there that actually had sold tickets. So we started to review with Erin and her team and James Miner talk about what they had in place in terms of social distancing, things of that nature. So some of them we could not cancel. Mr. Hardy and I had a conversation. We have let a few of those booked performances start to happen just because it was not fair to them last minute to try and cancel. But we do have concerns moving forward and want to get direction from you. I had a conversation with the Hartleys down in Venice in that pack. Let me tell you that they've done a tremendous job in terms of trying to figure out how they could open that facility in terms of safe distancing in the facility. Where would they sit people? They've got graphs. Talk about how many people that equates, what that revenue looks like. I know Jim Miner has done a lot of work at Riverview. At this point, I believe the state has said for performing arts centers, they can open at 50% capacity. I think if we are trying to practice social distancing in as much as we possibly can in the seating in those facilities, we probably can't get to exactly 50% capacity, but they can get close. And talking with the Hartleys, that 50% is kind of about what starts to make sense for some performances. Anything less than that doesn't make sense for them to bring a performance in because it just costs more money than the revenue that's being brought in. So I think we just wanted to make sure that we understand where the board would like us to be in terms of rentals moving forward. Again, where we are right now is we're not taking any new rentals in. We've canceled what we could cancel. We've left those rentals that have sold tickets already, and we're very close to having the performances continue to happen, but want some direction moving forward and what your thoughts are in terms of reopening outside rentals with practicing social distancing, minimizing some of the capacities, or what your thoughts are in that arena.
Mrs. Brown?
When you're talking about some of those that have sold tickets, are we talking about some of those, there's dance companies in town that...
Yes.
How about the one on August 15th? Have you canceled that one with, I think it's Mystic Dance Company?
So that one is still sitting in there, and I owe them an explanation, and so kind of a direction of what we're doing. So there are a bunch still sitting in there that have sold tickets, and I said, listen, I was just hold off till we have this conversation, because at the end of the day, I don't want to hurt them, but I want to make sure we're doing the right thing for us, the district. And so if the decision is, hey, we really don't want to open to more performances at this point, then we'll have to give them that message, certainly, and they'll have to refund those tickets.
I just say that because, we bought costumes, for the one that was supposed to be in June. All right, so now we got another one in August.
Sure.
But, yeah, because it's not just the tickets. I mean, they bought costumes, and I know they haven't sent letters yet because they didn't hear yet, but I know there was one that was in July did that get canceled? Did you let that go through?
We let everything that had sold tickets. There were 2 at Riverview High School that had sold tickets that are, actually there's one tonight, I believe, and one coming up later this week that we are letting happen because, again, we were right on top of the performance. It didn't make sense. And the other thing, the organizations had done a really good job of staggering people into seating, staying under 50%, requiring everybody wear a mask when they get there. So they did a great job of trying to make sure they were practicing all the safe practices put out by the CDC. So we made a decision in consultation with Mr. Hardy to let those go on.
But our custodians are having to clean those buildings, though, right? After we rent them?
We do. Our custodians go in, our teams go in and clean after the rentals. That's one of the things that we've talked about doing, is adding an additional cleaning fee on top, because it is over and above what we've done in the past, which is something we can do. But there is concern. I mean, our staff are nervous. I will have to say that we've had several custodians test positive over the last several weeks that we've had to work through. And so I think all staff, you've heard from teachers today, you've heard from other people, I think all staff are worried. And I think that's the reason we wanted to put the brakes on the rentals at this point and have a conversation with you about best way to move forward.
One comment and then Bridget. I don't want to put the extra burden on staff to have to clean up when the company with the rentals, when we rent our spaces out. I just don't think it's fair to staff. Bridget?
Thank you. So from a contractual standpoint, and I'm not going to go one by one on what we have open, I know when it came to renting in the broader sense, certainly over the summer, I know I brought it up for third-party organizations, particularly around childcare, because they didn't have the capacity space for social distancing. However, now, especially hinging off of what we just talked about, of pushing to August 31st and getting staff into 17th, and I know, and we already have a stretched staff as it is, as you point out, it would be my preference that we can shift gears, solely focus. And again, I understand that it can be challenging, and I think there are so many, we can keep going, where there are a lot of a lot of challenging things that people will have to, under unfortunate circumstances or unforeseen consequences of something, that because things have been changed or canceled or can no longer be safely offered. So in my opinion, I think it makes sense. Again, I defer to our council contractually, but I, at the broader sense, believe we should halt those rentals so that we aren't pushed, unless they are bringing their own cleaning team in. But my thought is that don't we need staff in there to start preparing for the beginning of school, if that's...
The question now that Jody's asking, as I understand it, is, should we enter into new agreements with people?
No.
No.
Okay, so that's the answer. Now, with respect to the ones that we already have out there, he is looking on them at a case-by-case basis. Some people understand and are moving away. Where we looked at a couple where there was a contract put in place and money had been spent in reliance on those contracts and tickets sold, those are the ones that we've said better to let that proceed rather than canceling it and potentially being liable for damages. That's not a school board event. That's a third-party event, so they're doing what they're doing. Our issue is we have to come back in and clean some afterwards. But
can they add? I'm sure. Can we add? Adding this after the fact that we signed a contract, but can they provide some cleaning services for us?
Not at this point. If the answer had been yes, go ahead and continue renting, then I think the recommendation would be to add cleaning onto it. But I think, for the reasons that Jody stated, there's no reason that we have to be renting at this point anyway, other than ones we've already agreed to based on our earlier conversations.
Shirley?
I'm not quite sure about that August 15th thing. So if they've sold tickets, they can still go on, or if we've got a contract. I mean, what I'd like to see is if you're going to be telling them no, they can't. If we've already made an agreement, and then tell them no, they can't, but yet we can't adjust their contract to add that cleaning fee. I mean, I don't want to just shut them out if they can do the social distancing. And by the way, I got some text messages I saw when we took the break. I'm not wearing a mask right now. I've got one here. I am more than 6 feet away from my colleagues. I've got a barrier up. If somebody comes near me, I put my mask on. But I've got the 6-foot distancing. Just add that, I'm sorry. But, sorry, the text messages stop.
I think when we have contracts out there, we're looking at it to see if we can agree with the other party to cancel that contract. If there's been reliance on that contract and money expended such that the school board might be on the hook to have to pay damages for breaching the contract, then we're letting those go forward. I don't know where any particular...
But they do have to social distance.
They do.
Okay.
They do.
Well, I think
churches.
I think that if we're not opening schools, then we should not be allowing anyone to come in. We should not be doing contracts.
We are opening schools on the 31st.
I think what it sounds like where we are, it seems to make a lot of sense to me, is we don't allow anything new. What did come in while we had the window open, we'll work with each one of the renters to say, can you cancel? We'd prefer that you cancel. If their answer is no, we've sold tickets, we've got financial liabilities out there, then we'll work with them to make sure they're following CDC guidelines in terms of those performances. So I think that's the fairest thing we can do at this point for everybody who has placed a rental with us. And I'm confident we can work with all those renters at this point to work it out.
So I just know in the past that we've had some long-term rentals where they rent our facilities for a year for every week or something. Do we have any of those that are in the system currently?
I don't think we do. I think most of the ones that are in there are, again, they're the dance performances, they're things of that nature.
One-offs.
Yeah.
What about the church? What about the churches that rent?
Well, we've got multiple churches that rent from us across the district. I don't believe those are in there yet, but we will have to look at that on a case-by-case basis because, again, those will throw us over some of our limits. So I don't think we want to be renting continually at this point. At least that's what I'm hearing. And I think just consideration as we move forward, if we close the window for doing any renting at this point and we work through what's currently in there, I know Mr. Renoff and I had conversations. As we move into the start of school, one of the things we're going to have to work with principals on is another one of your decisions up there in terms of policy decisions for today is childcare. We have a number of rental agencies that come in and they rent school after hours, after school hours. They provide after-hour activities. I think we're just going to have to be very, very careful with those because as we try to socially distance as much as possible from our aftercare activities, we're just going to have to be careful we don't allow people to rent and we don't have the space. We're competing for space in those schools. So I just think when we do open, we're just going to have to be careful with that to make sure we don't compete for space.
One of the things we talked about this morning is possibility of students, if it's a larger class, of making the students, letting them go into the cafeteria or the media center, or a Booker High School, Venice Performing Arts Center.
Sure.
Yes. So if we have to start doing that, we need to make sure that we have the availability to move our kids into those places. Mrs. Brown.
Yeah, mine was just about those after-school programs, like their cheerleading and dance and drama or different, they have, and maybe, I don't know what else they have, but those kinds of things after school. And I think we need to be very careful about those.
Yes, I would agree. I think in talking with the principals, based on the need that families will have and the potential impact of our families, they are totally supportive of embracing every effort to try to make before and or after care happen at our facilities. But that being said, with the caveat that capacity may be impacted. One, specific facilities, like Jody just said, you've got enhanced cleaning requirements that are going to have to happen in the evening, and then last but not least, safely distancing requirements. So we need to make sure we take all of that into consideration before we allow any other outside groups come into our schools. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah. Bridget.
Thank you. And I think Michael John, and thank you for being on this call the whole time. I really appreciate it. The one thing I wanted to, I know I'd asked this when we met on the 2nd, and please forgive me for kind of if you don't have this information right away, but I know there's a lot of concern as the rises, as it increases, but have there been any outbreaks in child care facilities? It's different from where I'm going, but in Sarasota County that we're aware as of yet?
Sure. No, good question. So glad to be back. I'll be good till about 5:30, and then I have to step off. But we have had cases, obviously, in children in Sarasota County, and some cases in children that are in child care facilities, but we have yet to have any outbreaks in those facilities. So a significant spread. Most of these facilities have been really responsive and exclude staff and expose children quickly, further limiting any spread. So we've been beneficial, and that's worked out well for us so far.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And to that, the reason I wanted to is I know that I am a big advocate of trying to see if us continue the child care, because if you think about us trying to lower the curve and shorten, eliminate the additional spread, when you remove childcare, you have them going to different places, and oftentimes it's not consistent, so you're actually exposing more and more people. However, so that's the big picture of why if someone wants to ask why AB kind of scheduling, oftentimes there's a number of logistics, but ironically AB scheduling that had been talked about as a hybrid, you would again, I think, be putting more people at risk, ironically, because there would not be a continuity of where those children go, and oftentimes, I can speak from my personal experience, you sometimes are scrambling to find someone, and that again is adding more exposure. But so I applaud and thank the principals for I was so excited when I heard about that they were going to continue as they could. My one concern is from the custodial staff standpoint, and so it would be my hope we have some kind of metric or some point at which, when it's over, if it's pushing them too much, where it's impacting the daily operations through school day, that's navigated, and I mean, I'd like to hear from the board, but I think that's something that I think those are the kind of benchmarks we need to put in place, because things may change so much. And again, to the public and because I know that can be very disruptive to families, and I think you're going with the best effort, but we also do need to protect our staff, and because if they start, that will impede, it has a ripple effect, especially from the safety standpoint. So didn't know if that's something you could speak to, or if any board members had any comments on that, but that's something I'd like to see us do.
Go ahead.
Well, I think Mr. Renoff and I work very closely together as a team. We always do, and certainly that daily feedback of what's going on at sites. I would caution all the board to say that we're making decisions today. They may change, September 1st, September 2nd, whatever those days look like, and we may have to make seat of the pants adjustments as we see how things develop. So I think we're going to continue to communicate. I know that there's a principal meeting scheduled tomorrow. We'll be talking a lot about these issues, and so we will listen, and I'm sure we'll work together to make sure at the end of the day we are turning schools back around for kids the next day. That's the ultimate goal, right? So we'll keep our eye on the ball there, and if we got to make adjustments, we will do that.
And I thank the board for your understanding about that caveat about the possibility of impacting capacity. We want to accommodate as many families and kids as possible, but given all those other factors, we really need to go ahead and take all of that into consideration.
Erica.
Yeah, I too echo Ms. Sigler's support for pre-care and aftercare. I mean, because the reality is, if you don't offer aftercare and pre-care, what's going to happen is parents still have to be at work at a certain time, and they're just going to drop off the kids, and then they're going to be unsupervised, and they're going to congregate. And I don't see how that does anybody any good. And they're still going to get off work at the certain time, and so they're just going to hopefully hang around the school. It would be worse if they left, but they're going to congregate around the school, and you're going to have the same issue that you have, but it just is that they'll be doing it unsupervised. It would be worse if the kids just fanned out and left the school unsupervised, and I don't want to be responsible for what happened then, waiting for their parents. Who knows what could happen to those kids unsupervised, just wandering the streets around the schools. So that's the reality of situations. The parents still have to go to work at a certain time, drop off the kids. Parents still going to pick up the kids at a certain time. That's just how things go. But I'm curious, are there groups who come into our schools to help support, provide direct student support after school, maybe like a tutoring program? I know there's places that come and pick up kids, but it's also my understanding that there are some programs that actually come in, maybe have clubs, but they're providing a direct support. I'm doing it different from, hey, I'm doing a play, to somebody who's actually providing interaction with our students. I look at those in a different light than somebody else renting. I'm just curious, do you guys look at those in a different light also?
No, I think we have, folks like the 21st Century that it is on a couple of different of our campuses. Again, we would want to go ahead and, if we can accommodate, I would love to be able to still be able to offer those services to our students.
But you're not putting them in the same bucket as somebody renting for a play, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's why I just wanted to make sure that we make that delineation to people who are providing direct support or interaction with our students is different than somebody who's renting space.
Right.
Jane?
I've spoken to Angie Stringer, who runs Girls Inc., and she is, I don't think he's listening. I've spoken to Angie Stringer, who runs Girls Inc., and she's interested in doing some programming, some after-school programming on our site, as well as doing it at Girls Inc. And she mentioned that to me just within the last few days. Do we know if COVID cases are tested, Michael? Do we know if COVID cases are tested for juveniles from the under 18 age anywhere other than Robert L. Taylor?
I know there are some private practices that are testing them, and the hospital, obviously. But as far as the pop-up sites that the health department's doing are, but the other large, like the University Town Center site, I don't believe
they don't test youth. They don't do anybody under 18. I just wondered if that. I was told that our Taylor was the only one that would do that in the county, and I don't think we've been testing a lot, but there's a pediatric report that I will refer to you all that comes out late Friday of every week that shows all the cases under 18 and under.
Laura?
Can I just make sure that we are completely clear on this rental thing? So if there is an organization providing services to our kids, but it's a for-profit, we're not considering renting. Those would be organizations, and that's a lot of what we have. But those are the organizations that would pull on our custodial staff. That's my understanding.
Clubs.
Yeah, so if there are organizations that charge kids and charge families for, having fun after school, that's not what we're talking about. If they're tutoring our kids, yeah, okay, just want to make sure.
Okay, Jane? You're good? Shirley?
Perhaps this might be a time, and I don't know, this would be to you, Art, if in our contracts, if we have anything in the contracts that would say, well, in the case of I forget, there's a term for it, some sort of
it's called
natural cause.
Force majeure.
Yeah. I didn't know how to say that. If we have something like that, not only for if COVID happens, but also contracts with other people if our funding gets cut and the money isn't there. So either of those issues, when we're looking at contracts, if we can put that in there, if funding doesn't come, we can't do this, or if, we get a swarm of locusts and we can't have a football game,
Well, that's certainly become more important recently. And I don't believe that has been part of the Facilitron contract, but Jody and I have discussed that needs to be included. With regard to, so that's the first part. The second part about our funding wouldn't apply to the situation of our rentals, but we do typically put clauses in our contracts where we're paying for services, for example, that gives us the opportunity to get out on 30, 60, 90 days notice. So if there becomes a problem.
Thank you.
Bridget?
Thank you. So, Dr. Kingsley, thank you for asking that clarifying question, because as Ms. Goodwin just mentioned, I believe there are third-party, I don't know what child care organizations that have limited capacity. And again, I kind of go back to, and even to what Mr. Robinson said, is that we've contracted with the Y for over years, or Girls Inc. hasn't really done things on site with us, but certainly I know they have limited capacity and they do have the opportunity to serve a lot of families that would need it. And again, these are all contingent upon we can be open and have you, but when we talk about third parties, that it would be an area I don't know that I would want to totally cut off. However, I go back to the custodial staff, is if we have, because that's gonna play a very detrimental in the long run. That's gonna, I think, gonna be negative and have a negative impact. So my question is, can they provide cleaning services, and then is that something the board is interested in continuing on with, or we want to say no third-party rental organization?
No, I would say no third-party rentals, because we can't depend upon somebody else to come in and clean like our staff would clean.
I don't diminish the quality comparison by any means. I'm just, okay.
And can I just say, it's not going to be forever, right? And those, I said, those groups that have fun with kids, they're also teaching them. So I don't want to minimize what they do, but it won't be forever. Just as we get going and we see what our capacity is for cleaning and keeping things clean.
Yeah, I think we'll very quickly kind of get an understanding of what daily activities, daily operations are going to look like in a COVID-19 environment. And as soon as we understand that we can handle what we're dealing with, then I think we certainly want to open those opportunities up for additional people on our campuses, for rentals to happen. I mean, those are all good things for kids. So at the end of the day, we'll know quickly. We just don't want to overpromise at this point.
All right. Jane?
I just wanted to say that somebody was listening to this wonderful workshop, and Girls Inc. works at Booker Middle School every day after school, and that they have about 15 other schools that they work in during the day. And I think Boys and Girls Club does some there's no way that the schools can provide after-school services to all the kids that we can't serve at our site. So it's either at site or at schools, but they're already doing some with us. I didn't know they were doing any with us.
And can I just say, we accumulated a list of essential contractors, so we'll get in touch with Girls Inc., and they're not on the list right now, and we'll have Sonia's team look at that. Yeah.
Okay. We do have contracts with a lot of these organizations that come before the board, and they provide services to our students directly, and those will continue. Those are considered essential.
Those are often during the school day,
but they're often
mentoring.
During the school day, and they're, mentoring activities more than anything. I think the Girls Inc., we provide transportation to their facility after school, and their issue is they don't have enough facility space to accommodate their kids. But I think, again, then that puts the burden on our custodial staff to do the cleaning in the facilities we're not quite sure about. So I think that's where we're kind of landing as to what's that proper balance.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. What's next?
So yeah, the other item was one that we're no longer entertaining, which was the early release. Oh, look at me. The early release day is not really an option anymore, given the way we're trying to plan out the school year now. So I think outside rentals are no new outside rentals. Early release doesn't matter, and childcare before and after school is a yes. So the next one, which Michael has 10 minutes before he has to leave us, so we may as well get to this one for sure, which is the school board's policy decision on facial coverings.
Bridget?
Thank you. So I'm going to, I think this is tough. I think that we certainly need to, if we wear social, I've looked at a lot of different, I'm sorry, I need to finish the sentence. Okay, so I'll start with, I have read a lot of other reopening plans at other districts, and it varies. What I certainly believe we need to provide additional mitigation tools and supplies for our staff for sure, but then also for our students. But where my question is when I've read different versions at different counties is some require it across the board with certain waivers based on special needs. And that there's kind of a spectrum. And then what I also have seen is they're not using mandated, but they're utilizing language that's not where it would be necessarily, it's highly encouraged or something of the sort. So, and the reason is there's concern about discipline action and what have you. So my question is, I believe and understand that we need to have mitigation tools when it can't be 6 foot social distancing. When you look at our capacities, what is the likelihood of having social distancing at 6 feet? Because I've seen other districts do 3 feet, but for 6 feet, and I know you sent us a spreadsheet, but I want to know what that looks like, because that to have it hard and fast, this is exactly what it is. It will be determined based on the reality of our capacities. So can you help in that aspect?
So let me clarify. You're asking me, can we get to 6 foot of distancing in classroom spaces? The answer in some classrooms is yes. The answer in others is no.
That's okay. I kind of knew that answer, and so with that comes, do you require it only when it's 6 feet, when you are able to 6 feet social distance, or do you do it across the board? I don't know if there are I believe if you've looked at other policies, or they weren't necessarily policies, but they're part of the reopening plan. But can you speak to some of the stuff?
I don't have all the verbiage. I've been collecting information anecdotally from lawyers around the state as we're trying to share information. Leon, for example, and this is, things change on a daily basis, so this is fairly recent information, but it's not today's. So I don't know, things could have changed places, but Leon is planning to require masks on buses during transitions and in classrooms and other areas where social distancing is not possible. Lee indicated they were similar to Leon. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's similar to Leon. Miami-Dade is requiring. Collier is requiring. Pinellas is requiring, except that pre-K and kindergarten may be optional. Orange indicated they were requiring K2 students to wear face shields and 3 to 12 to wear masks. Hillsborough was requiring face coverings. Several North Florida counties said they had no requirements.
So I'll finish up with what I'd like to see, and so we can see what anyone else thinks. But I think that I think face shields are helpful. I know that's why I asked that question, particularly for instructional staff. But I'd like to see it being highly encouraged or what have you when social distancing is not available, required. That's where I stand. 4. Could have said just 4. So, but on buses, I mean, that's where I stand.
Shirley?
I agree with 4, which is strongly recommended but mandatory during transitions outside of the classrooms and on the bus, and when you can't have that social distance in the classroom. And I also want to be sure that if there is a teacher who feels one reason or another that she wants everyone in her class to have a mask, that she ought to be able to have that. Require that of her students, especially when you're into the high school areas and stuff like that. And I've heard some of the emails I have from some teachers saying they don't need it. And I'm like, yeah, you do. If not for yourself, I mean, how would you feel if somebody got it in your classroom and you spread it around? It's difficult. They're not all that comfortable, but they're not as uncomfortable as some other items that we have to wear. I think teachers ought to be able to say, in my classroom, I want my students to wear a mask. And so I guess 4 is probably the closest we can get to that. Because there are times when they can't, especially when you're dealing with students that are working on speech and things like that. They can't have their masks on. They need to watch how their mouths are going. But we've got the face shields, and and we're going to have some barriers. So I mean, these kids are going to have more safeguards than they do going to Publix. And I guess the big thing, we're not Home Depot, but Home Depot doesn't give you the little the little shield in the classroom either, and we're going to have more than what you normally get. But I think the extra that we get with the face shield, I think it's showing over and over that's what we need to stop the spread. So I'm going to go with 4, with an understanding that a teacher can say, no, in my class you're wearing it.
Jane?
Well, of course, I would be different. I think it should be mandatory, and here's why. I think it's going to be hard on small children. Under 5, they don't have enough breath to really throw much out in the air, at least from what I've read from pediatricians and medical specialists. But after that, particularly at age 10, they can. Parents need to have children start wearing masks at home. And one of the best things that they can do is to have them, wear a mask for a little while and then take it off. I mean, they wear Halloween masks. So they've got to get used to it because, folks, we're going to be wearing masks. It's not going to be the exception. It's going to be the rule in this country, I feel, for quite a while. I just hate for teachers to have to make the decision. Here we go again. If, they don't want to make all these decisions. They want us to make the decisions for them. It's like leadership at the top says, do this and do this, and then people will do it. Students will do it. So I would say make it as strong as possible, particularly for middle and high school kids. And wearing this mask when I need it most is when I'm talking or when I'm singing, which you don't want to hear me sing. But it's when, you're projecting your voice out, and that's when the things go into the air. And it goes many more feet than 6 feet. The estimate's now that it's airborne for quite a period of time. That's why we're worried about air conditioning systems and all those other things. But I would say mandatory for middle and high school. Start with that, and in between classes and on buses for little peeps, and see how that goes. But don't give that. Don't make another decision for a teacher to make, because they don't want to make this decision. I'll tell you that they have enough on their plates, and it needs to be a mandatory issue to some degree.
Eric?
Here's a bad thing now, is now Ms. Zucker is going to make me follow Ms. Goodwin every time now because I'm agreeing with her again. And I'm never going to be able to be the first one to speak again.
I didn't think about that, Eric, but that's a good one.
But when I think of facial cover, I'm thinking of masks and shields and anything like that. But I'm not just thinking about the classroom settings or the actual event. I'm thinking about the teachers are going to ask, do I want to go back to school are you guys mandating face shields? Are you mandating masks? It's a very common question they ask. And they're using that as a deciding factor about whether they want to come back. And so, I'm going to be consistent with my previous discussion earlier. It's not just about this actual event, it's about the appearance of taking this issue seriously. And we need to be concerned about teachers coming back to work. We're concerned about subs. If we don't get enough teachers and we don't get enough subs, it's going to be disastrous. We need to be thinking about culture. We need to be, this sends a signal to them. It's more than just what it represents. It's the signal. It's more than the actual event. It's what it represents and the signal that it sends. And for the board to say we're mandating masks and shields, it sends a message that we're taking this issue seriously, and we're going to do everything we can to protect you. And for that reason, in addition to the ones that Ms. Goodwin said, I would be advocating for number one.
I'm at number one. It's mandatory for students and staff. Bridget?
I was just going to add, I actually liked the caveat of particularly maybe utilizing mandatory for middle and high. It's the lower elementary side that and I don't think it's impossible because I have seen my daughters wear them. But I also, I'm actually taking into account feedback I've received from teachers about face masks for elementary. And that's why I had leaned more towards 4 in the aspect of we're sending a message that, so I don't think the language in 4 is I don't think it's strong enough. So I'm fine with almost a blend, but my feedback is coming from teachers in the elementary side to have effective an educational environment, but I certainly understand that we have to make concessions and comfort. So I think people can adapt, and if based on the feedback, and I'd love to hear if you have any from staff standpoint, because I've heard both, but I do want it to be strongly enforced or encouraged, and I agree with the middle and high school, but from an elementary standpoint, I've heard a lot from elementary teachers of the challenges that would pose. So could you provide any feedback to that?
But it also, elementary kids, I understand, will be more inclined to use the shields on the desk, and as long as they're behind the shields, they don't have to have their mask on. Is that not true?
No.
The barriers, you mean?
The barriers. Yeah. I call them shields. I don't know what to call them. Barriers.
They're barriers.
Mike?
Obviously, the more you put on.
Everybody keeps
So to quickly answer that question.
Go ahead.
The barrier is not going to offer the same protection as a mask. So they're offered serve two different purposes. And on the discussion that's going on here as it relates to masks, the barrier is not a substitute for the mask.
Okay. Mandatory mask.
And or face shields. The language has to be very clear. Okay. Facial coverings.
Shirley?
Well, I think this is going to be a good idea, and I think maybe what we'll find is even after COVID's over, we might want to be using face masks, not mandatory, but so maybe when the flu season comes around that we won't be spreading the flu. This is what they do in several other countries. I'd also like to put out there that I would hope that anybody who was out there still vaping or smoking would stop, because that damages your lungs too, especially this vaping. And don't open yourself up for getting this. But I would think that we could use this and go forward, and perhaps see it whenever infections are going around, because I think we had a lot of people out for the flu last time.
Laura?
So I just want to, I'm not sure if the slide earlier on the survey showed you the staff survey. So on July 10, Denise's team pulled the data again. And so, I'm sorry, I'm going to pull this down. mandatory for students and staff, our instructional folks said 53% said they want a mandatory. Classified said 42%, and administrators said 38%. And then the other one that you talk about, the strongly recommended but mandatory during transitions, et cetera, 27% said yes to that as far as our instructional staff, 31% classified, and 36% administrative. So, just FYI.
I still said mandatory. Jane?
Well, I just think it has to be mandatory, and I think that we have to do all we can do to make it easier for everybody in all of our administration, and then have it as an absolute. So call it a mask or call it a face covering, but it's going to be a fashion statement. They've just developed one that's sold with diamonds for $5,000, I guess, in India. So the next time you're over, Shirley.
Bridget?
Michael, one more question for you, particularly as it relates to, man, it's a long day. I can't get words out of my mouth. As it relates to face shields, it's my understanding they have to have the right size, because I'm thinking of littler humans. So does that work for smaller children? Is that something, has staff looked at where we would order that? Because I understand there's sizes, so.
Adjustable in the back.
I know they make different sizes, but I'm not sure if they make like a pediatric size. I'd have to do some investigation and research on that. But yeah, the adult mask would fit on might not fit on a child, an elementary school child the same as middle school or high school. So
okay,
that might be problematic.
Thank you.
Mitzi, what are you saying?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to step out. I'm happy to, Jody knows how to get me. If you need anything, I'm more than happy to
thank you.
answer any other questions.
Michael, thank you so much.
So much.
We appreciate it, Mike.
Mitzi, what were you saying?
I said they have pediatric masks that we can order, and then the face shields have, they're adjustable, the ones that you can buy, and they have think of the visors that have the clips in them. It's kind of the same thing where they could clip in. Jody can tell you more, but
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of PPE, I mean, something that doesn't fit right is just as bad as not wearing it at all. So we got to make sure we can accommodate different sizes. So we'll work on that. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next.
Okay, so we have that decision, and then I think the last one that we had was, if you would come to consensus about the August 31st date, and then the plan. I think those are the two things that are left. So, August 31st?
August 31st.
Okay, brick and mortar, August 31st. So that'll give us time to get good answers from our parents and be able to plan.
So what I heard from this morning, and I think the superintendent is looking for the board's direction in a vote, is to authorize her to send the plan to Tallahassee for a DOE approval with the change that we would be opening school, both brick and mortar and virtual,
Remote.
Remote.
That's okay.
Remote education beginning August 31st. Doesn't necessarily have to be part of the plan, but what the board discussed was that 196-day staff would come on the 24th, but be offered 5 extra duty days starting the 17th. 180-day staff would be starting on the 31st, but would have 5 extra duty days offered starting on the 24th.
May I have a motion on that for?
So moved. I mean, that's a long motion. So, I mean, do you have, Kathy, do you have that? And I want to make sure the board understood.
Just say so moved.
I need a second.
Yeah, so moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
5 zeros all day.
5-0.
I thought we had this online. No? You didn't come up?
No, it's
There was a whole lot
switching
of-
back and forth.
to discuss things.
It's tired.
Yeah.
The program is tired.
Yeah, it said item 44.
I don't know that there was a motion.
That was it.
Well, before we go away, we didn't do the part about the notification process and about what are we going to do? I mean, because that was a big question we were getting from all of the teachers. And, you know, I'm sorry that the gentleman from the Department of Health isn't here anymore, but, you know, can somebody walk us through that?
Sure, absolutely. So what we have in the PowerPoint is just kind of a high-level flow chart of the way the communication is going to go, and I'll just kind of talk through it. You can follow along if you'd like to on the flow chart. And let me thank Susie DeBose and Melanie Gombos for doing the background work on this. But what we will be distributing to sites tomorrow to administrators is a mechanism, basically an online form where we will have all COVID-related cases, symptoms, whatever comes up at a school site or a department or wherever it is in the district, anything that's suspected to be possibly COVID-19 related will be coming in reported via this tool. It's an online tool, and again, what we'll ask principals, department heads is who do you want to have access to the tool? Certainly clinic aides, nurses, APs, principals, probably administrative assistants. This is the way we are going to get notified from a school site that we've got something potentially going on, either with a student or with an employee regarding COVID-19. The form, it basically, they input some information like who's the person with the potential COVID-19 exposure, how long have you been on campus, who have you been in contact with. That comes in, and we are going to have several teams of people who are going to be responding to these reports. We're not asking for phone calls. We get notified immediately when a new report comes in. We will have basically a Susie DeBose, a team leader over each of these areas, so that the school's dealing with one person. As these reports come in, that team leader will be responsible for running down the information on every one of those reports. And I know everybody is saying, tell me what you're going to do if there's a positive COVID-19 case for a student in my class. And I will tell you, I'd love to give you that answer, but every single case is different. What we are doing is we're using this process to get the report in, and then that team leader, Susie DeBose at this point, will be running down the details in that case, and that will be talking to everybody involved with the exposure. Who's had the exposure? Do we have a confirmed positive test? Is it a rumor? If it is a confirmed positive, how long have you been on campus in the last several days? Who have you been in contact with? All of that, this team is going to be responsible for assembling. They will make the call to the health department. The health department will work through those details regarding that case. The health department will then drive decisions about, okay, what do those exposures look like and what do we need to do? Are we talking about excluding people for 14 days? Are we excluding them for something different than that? Are we closing a class? Are we closing a building? How are we responding to this? We have to assemble that information and then work with the health department very closely. Once we figure out exactly what's happened in that case, then we will communicate back to site administrators so they know what's going on, and everybody involved in that case, specifically about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And again, those responses will be driven by the types of interactions that person who is potentially COVID-19 or COVID-19 positive has had with everybody on campus. And we've been doing a lot of trial runs with this in the last several weeks. It's been almost every day we've had somebody from some of our operations departments who have been in contact with somebody COVID-19 or has tested positive. And so we are working these issues right now on a daily basis. And let me tell you, it is time consuming, and we have to be very detailed in terms of what those exposures look like. I don't have them here for you today, but the health department has a whole guide that they follow in terms of what a critical exposure is. I will tell you that I learned a lot from Michael in terms of how valuable masks are, and I'm very happy you got to where you are with facial coverings. I will tell you, if we have a class where we have a student potentially that's tested positive for COVID-19 or a potential positive test, the response in terms of who we have to exclude if masks are being worn is much different than if masks are not being worn. So I think it puts us in a much better spot with the decision you made today. So What I wanted to show you today is that we have a process that we've laid out. We are going to be discussing it with principals tomorrow. We're going to talk about the process. We're going to give them the tools starting tomorrow. So as things are happening on campus now, even though we don't have a lot of people on campus, if we have an issue, we'll start to use the tool. We'll identify the additional teams because Susie cannot do this on her own. We need multiple teams with somebody who can be the team lead. We need somebody from HR because we now, if we have an employee who's been exposed, what's the leave look like? We need to explain that to them. So we'll have somebody from HR involved. If it ends up having to be reported to workers' comp, we'll make sure that that all happens. So that team that's going to be taking in these reports is going to manage those cases. And it's my thought that we'll start off with 3 of those teams. We'll assign schools so that if I am the principal at Philippi Shores, Allison, Mrs. Foster, she knows who she's talking to and she can create a relationship with that person who's tracking down that case at her site. Accuracy of information and then communication of the facts back to the site is going to be critical in a timely manner because everybody gets very scared quickly and rumors start to fly. So we have to have teams assembled to be able to respond quickly, and we have to do that with guidance from the health department. So the health department is critical in terms of this process. So I apologize. I can't give you this is what happens in your classroom. If this happens, I can tell you we have a process in place, and then we'll run each of those cases down as we need to as they come in.
Can we get that out to staff?
It is. We will start with this tomorrow. So again, our goal is to start focusing on communications out tomorrow. And so we'll start with principals. We'll talk about the process with principals, and then we'll start communicating out to other employees, staff, teachers, so that they know what the process is moving forward when we have an issue on campus.
Okay, Eric.
I initially checked my button when we were talking about the plan, so I know it's.
I was waiting for them to come
because
through.
you did the motion in second and there was no discussion, so I want to go back and talk a little bit about that. I know it seems out of order. I'm only bringing it up but I'm hoping that now that you guys have approval on some of these larger things, that details are now going to be fleshed out. So I believe that what causes stress is uncertainty. So when you're in traffic, what's causing the stress isn't the fact you're in traffic, it's that you don't know when you're going to get home, and you want to get home at a particular time. And so it's that level of uncertainty that's causing that stress level. And so that level of uncertainty of not knowing from these teachers what happens when this happens, what happens when that happens. And there's so many details that they're going to want to know in order to lower their stress level. And I've asked this question, think about every time we've done reopening, so I'm going to ask the question again. What do we do when we find out that we're going to close a classroom? What metrics are you going to be able to use? Not just about one student. What are you going to do when you have to close a school, and what metrics are you going to use to have a school? Because what's going to happen, a student's going to get sick. A student's going to get COVID. It's going to happen. It's just statistically impossible, the sheer number of people we have. Teachers are going to start saying, well, how come they're not doing this? How come they're not closing down my classroom? How come they're not going to close down the school? But if you tell people ahead of time, these are the metrics that we're going to be using to make these type of decisions, it lowers the stress level. The uncertainty, which is going to cause the rumors and the stress and people not wanting to be there, we need to clamp down on. It goes back to what I've been saying about, the perception becomes reality. So people are asking about closing the school. They're automatically assuming that if one kid gets in the classroom's going to get closed. That is the assumption by a lot of the teachers. At least that's how they're emailing. So you gotta communicate with people about what that means. But besides that, you're gonna have to flesh out a lot of these details. Whether it's about courtesy busing, whether it's about how food service is gonna work, you're gonna have to flesh out all these details and not be trying to figure out once it happens, because it's a foregone conclusion that there's going to be a school where you're going to have multiple people have COVID, and what are you going to do about it? And you got to make that decision now, because if you don't, when the time comes, the anxiety level is going to be felt by everybody in that school, and it's not going to be helpful. So I implore you to start thinking about all those eventualities now and communicate and come up with metrics and how you're going to decide things and what's going to be the trigger mechanisms so as to alleviate the stress and anxiety of the staff. And that's going to cause more people to want to come work at our school, or cause less people to want to come.
I think that's what I asked you to do.
No, agreed 100%. And so we like I said, I think Dr. Kingsley referred to that earlier. So we will be moving forward with ironing out all those details and communicate, and listen moving forward as we try to move now that we have a plan in place. That's what we'll be focusing on. So more to come on all of that, and point taken.
Shirley?
Well, I'm just going to reiterate that point. You talked about that he had a chart that talked about critical exposure. I can't tell you how much I would have loved to have seen that today. I mean, I think a lot of people would have liked to have seen, what is that? Because I think this is really the bottom line of some of the things that we wanted to know today. What is critical exposure? We had him close that we could have asked him some of these questions, because I think a lot of people are wanting that medical opinion of what we need to do. What does critical exposure look like? How much safer are we if we have a mask? How true is that story out there that if we keep our mask on all day, we're going to die from carbon dioxide? I mean, some of those things, we need that explanation. And Jody, we don't need it from you. We need it from, an expert. And if we can get even a video, a clip of something like that we can put on our website so that anybody can look at it anytime, not just those people who want to hang out with us, for 8 hours a day and listen to us. But we need to have that information out there for anyone to get. And that critical exposure, whatever that was, I would have loved to have seen that today. And that's exactly, what we know. And then, the other thing about the contact, it's those HIPAA laws we have to be careful of too.
Sure. Understood. Absolutely. And
I like your chart. That's a real help.
Well, and that's just a piece of what we have. Remember, this work has been going on behind the scenes. A lot of this is all laid out, and you will start to see that tomorrow as we communicate with principals. And certainly, I apologize that wasn't in the presentation today. We had to select with what we thought we could get through. I certainly can forward that to you later today, and you'll see what Susie DeBose has worked out with the health department in terms of what critical exposures look like.
Bridget?
Thank you. So I'm going to reiterate the communication piece, and over-communication is going to be the key. If going to the plan, I recognize, I recognize there are a lot of things going to be pushed out to this at the school level, and then to move forward from staffing and all of that stuff. What I want to make sure is that these administrators, school-based administrators, have the support from a communication standpoint, that they're able to get that info, because it's different at each school from a program standpoint. I know people have asked about Pineview specifically, and I think there are other questions about Oak Park, and there are other questions. I mean, there's a lot, and I believe they needed some, what do you call them again? Guardrails, which we've established today, but then it goes to that next phase, and those administrators are not only going to be putting these plans together, so I don't want them burdened with the communication piece. So our comms team's ready to be deployed fully, because it's both staff and families. So I want to make sure, so I want to make sure that's something we've thought about to help support at the school-based level.
Absolutely. I mean, we're there to I think we're going to work as a team very closely moving forward. And I know that Craig and his team are absolutely aligned to focus on this as we move forward. So
perfect. I just wanted to be there because I know there are lots of questions, particularly about individual schools, and I want, Okay, so next one, I have a question about when it comes to face coverings. How are we handling, and I'm going to use this term loosely, but waivers when it comes to a special needs, or if it comes to there are a wide variety of circumstances that would potentially either require someone to not wear one. How are we handling that? Are we saying that they're not eligible to come to school? What are our options? So I need some clarity on that.
Well, it's a face covering, so. Gosh. So it is a face covering. So, for example, those who are hearing impaired need to be able to see someone's face.
Okay.
Potentially. So in that case, we would recommend that the teacher wears a face mask. I mean, a face shield rather than a face mask.
So mandatory. There is going to be no waiver. It's just.
But there are many of our ESC students who have sensory issues. They cannot wear a mask on their face, and so those will have to. We're going to have to work with each of these individual kids, and they'll have to request a waiver. It'll be part of their IEP. I would think at this particular point, we would just do it as a component piece of their IEP.
Right, and I would think our policy would have to recognize some amount of exception for certainly exceptional students.
And I just wanted to get to what level is that, because there was an example used for, there's a variety of reasons where someone can't wear a mask and a face shield, but and so I want to make sure staff has the support and knowledge of how far does that go. I don't know what that answer is. I mean, if it's someone who's experienced trauma versus something, I mean, so those are the things that I'm not sure about, but we probably would want to be prepared for, just as we're asking staff to make the individual decision what's best for them within the parameters of what we're requiring. There's going to be some elements that we're going to have. If it's mandatory, we have to have some guidance on to how far we can do that and still be in compliance with, IEPs and what have you. So, okay.
Can I just add to that?
Yes, please.
Bridget? Because I don't think it's just our ESE students. We may have children with healthcare issues and parents who, for whatever reason, feel very strongly that their child's health is compromised by having a mask on. So I think we're going to have to figure it out.
I think it has to be either educational or health related.
Yes.
What I'm hearing from the board is it's not personal choice.
Okay. And then the last question was something when it goes to contact tracing. And I agree with what Mr. Dumas said is, I do understand it's case by case, and I wish we could answer that question. But what I have seen is how ominous and how quickly contact tracing can become challenging, and then having limited bandwidth to that. So you said we would have 3 teams, and the teams are made up of how many people, give or take?
Sorry. So we got a team lead, so somebody like a Susie who's kind of the person interacting, who understands what the interactions were. We can identify a couple more people to do that. And then we need representatives from HR on those teams, certainly at a minimum, and somebody probably from risk management, just to make sure we're providing the right information to employees who are in the mix in terms of the exposures. So we haven't fully vetted out who are going to be on those teams. I've asked Susie to give us some input in terms of who would be good in those roles, but we're going to start with 3 teams initially. That may need to be more if we get a lot of contact tracing that we have to do, because it takes time to work through these things. So that's our plan at this point.
And that was the other question from a privacy standpoint of making sure, and I know we asked this in the last time, but when there's a process in which you make them aware they've been exposed, but when you said to verify accuracy, how are we doing that?
So we are asking at this point, so one of the things we're struggling with right now, and it just happened this past week, is we get somebody who calls us and says, hey, I've tested positive. In a best case scenario, we would call the health department. They'd look in the database and say, yep, Jody Dumas tested positive. Right now, that is lagging, and so we have reports coming in with verified test data that gets emailed to the individual, or else they're getting their test information that says a positive test, and health department doesn't have it in their system yet. So we are asking for verification that it's a positive test, because that's one of the issues that we've run into very quickly, is that we'll get a rumor that we've got a positive COVID test, and we run it down, it's not.
Okay.
And so it's trying to determine, do we have a positive COVID test?
And this
That's
is
number
an
one.
employee.
Currently all employees, correct.
Okay, I have a couple of questions here. If the teacher teaches 5 classes a day with 30 students each, do all 150 of these students need to then stay home and quarantine for 14 days?
It certainly depends on, number one, were face masks being worn? the proximity and the length of time that the interactions took place with the kids and the teacher. So again, those are the types of questions that have to be asked in every case. So potentially yes, but in many cases no. So again, that's a moving target. It depends specifically on the instance. If, let's take an example that we've got somebody a student who tests positive in a class. They've been on campus the last week. They just found out they tested positive. Nobody's wearing masks. Students were not socially distancing. Everybody they came in contact with is going to be out for 14 days. If, however, there was some mitigation in there were masks being worn, we were socially distancing, then the potential is that not everybody has to socially isolate for 14 days. Potentially, we just make sure everybody's wearing a mask and self-monitor. So again, those are the types of things that the health department's going to have to help us work out in each and every case.
Let me follow up, because
Sure.
Do all of those students now need to get tested? And if so, who pays for it?
We're not requiring testing in any case. If there's been an identified critical exposure to somebody who's tested positive, we are saying you got to be out for 14 days. We're not requiring testing, and that's the recommendation of the health department. So in no cases will we say go get tested. We will say, what's the interaction? Was it an interaction with a person who's verified COVID positive? If yes, you're out for 14 days.
So that would be the same if someone were tested positive in their home. Does that teacher now need to take 14 days off of work to quarantine?
Potentially, yes, and we have that going on right now. And so what we would do is if you are a teacher and you have to be out for 14 days, you then will transition to the federal leave, and yes, you'll be paid. It's 14 days, 10 days paid leave, so it covers you for 2 weeks. So that's where HR would get involved. If we've got somebody that says, let's take me for example, I'm a teacher. My wife test positive for COVID-19. Obviously, I've had interactions with her. The health department is going to ask me to self-quarantine for 14 days. HR would then work with me and get me on that federal leave so that I can be paid for that amount of time.
Okay, substitute teachers teach in multiple schools. What if they are diagnosed with COVID-19? Do all the kids in each school now quarantine get a test?
No. Again, back to my original comment, in the last scenario, it's specific to every case. And so we would look at where they've been, what are the interactions been with the students, and then the health department would work with us in terms of who needs to self-isolate, who doesn't. So there's a whole lot of variables in there, but it's not necessarily everybody. It just depends on what those interactions have been with the person who's tested positive.
Okay.
So if I can, unless you have more questions, I just wanted to verify. So based on the plan and the way we were offering instruction, if we are going to do the concurrent interactive instruction, it will require us to purchase these cameras. So again, now I'm kind of going back to the capital aspects of that. So we can pursue that if that's the avenue we wish to go down. We also need to look at, for remote learning, the number of available laptops we have and how many more we need to acquire. And we also have to look at bandwidth. So these things are unknown, may not be known for 2 to 3 weeks, but I just want, kind of a confirmed nod that this is what we want to do.
Yeah. We also have, what are we going to do about hotspots?
Well, we have 500, 800. I think we have 800, and then we're getting another 300 through the Sprint.
For hotspots?
Yes.
Hotspots means, okay, I mean hotspots where there is no connectivity.
That's what she's talking about.
Okay.
It's using cell phone coverage.
Do we have any up in North County?
Do we have any what?
Dead spots. I'll call them dead spots.
I don't know. I mean, the students will contact and work with their schools and their schools' TSPs. This is the plan. The schools' TSPs will provide them. If they don't have internet access, they get a Sprint Wi-Fi hotspot, and that provides them, not Wi-Fi, Sprint.
Well, Sherry Freeland Eddy would like to know if there's any hotspots in North County. So if you find that out, could you please tell her?
Dead spots, you mean?
Dead spots.
Oh,
Dead spots, hot spots.
That sounds like a question for
Whatever.
the telecommunications.
Shirley?
We'll check with Joe. I think so.
trying to remember what they were. One of them is perhaps when we get, you've probably seen that those lists of questions, and they seem to be, I think they're 1 to 15. If maybe somebody could look at them and try to answer them, and maybe work with the union, and so that we'll put them on the F&Q.
Yeah, we've updated the FAQ. It has a lot of those questions in there.
There's all the questions.
The other question I have is, what if you're positive and you have no symptoms? Could you still teach from home?
Yes.
Or do we, I guess if the kids were still in school.
So we just had that conversation this morning. So if we get a teacher who tests positive but has no symptoms and can continue to work remotely to provide support to those students, I think we want to encourage that and be able to work with that teacher to make that happen. Again, we know we're going to be short already. If we can work with those teachers to make that continually happen, that educational, again, that continuity is important with the same teacher. If they're willing to do that and will work with us, absolutely, we want to encourage that.
Eric?
Are you done?
Well, there was that one other issue is where we're talking about having that extra week of training, and I go back to hazard pay for those subs. If we're looking at putting in extra money, but we don't know yet how many subs we're going to need and if they're going to be available, but. Before we bring them back 2 weeks and do that extra week of training, maybe we need to look at, do we need to put more money into subs? I don't know. Just throwing that out there to think about in the future.
Eric?
Yeah, so I'm going back to the cameras. You talked about this morning, you talked about 180 degrees, and I'm going to be talking about voice activated, walking around, really cool. Were we talking about this for elementary, all classes, one in every single class? What are you thinking about?
Well, we could ultimately have them in one in every class, but it's going to, to me, the rollout would be based upon how the schools are scheduling and how the classes are working out. So if you have 2 who are remote and 20 who are in the class for a 4th grade class that has 22, that could be a concurrent thing with a.
So we were all nodding our head about cameras, but obviously, but I want to know what the price is.
The cameras are like $600.
Really?
Yeah, they're pretty inexpensive.
Wow, that's
to do the 180, but then you have to do the installation potentially. And again, if the camera's in the back of the room and you're in the front of the room, you may need extension for USB, which may cost more. So, we could get, it could definitely be more expensive. Jamal, do you think that, that's what Joe had said, like $585?
I know when we first got them, they were on sale. We can check again, but yeah, I would say probably about $500
I know. I've been in the market for a web. It's hard to find web cameras these days.
He's been in contact with CDW already.
Okay, I'm just letting you.
Yeah, they don't have enough. If we wanted to do one for every classroom, obviously there are not enough in stock, but they have, I think he said 1,700.
But I can imagine you're going to spend more than $50,000 on cameras.
Correct. They're under state contract, and will come to you.
I still would like to be kept abreast of how much money we're spending, that's all.
Agreed.
Especially with all the capital expenditures we were talking about this morning, and so.
Right, it'll impact,
I think that this is the priority for capital. I'm just being consistent about my discussion this morning, but apparently I'm in the minority, but regardless of that fact, I still want to know how much it is.
Yeah, I would say under $2 million to outfit every single classroom, which is pretty.
Under $2 million, okay.
I know, it's a lot of money, don't get me wrong. $500 a laptop doesn't sound bad until you multiply it by 40,000, then it becomes $20 million.
Talking about laptops, right now we have enough devices, correct me if I'm wrong, we have enough devices to achieve 85% penetration of our students, which would probably mean probably closer to 80% of the students that we have. Is the goal to go out and still go and cannibalize from the schools? Because you talked about purchasing laptops, to use the laptops that were returned. What are your thought processes if we have to get laptops?
Right. There was the starting point would be the ones that have been returned that have been from the 2021 or 1920 refresh.
Okay.
So that becomes the starting point. But then there may be carts of laptops at a school that we could potentially use. But again, we don't want to, if we're brick and mortar, you don't want to bring and remove all the assets from
Well, my fear is that this ebb and flow that we're going to have is people may flow and not ebb. So they may take the laptops home, and then when they come back, we don't have any computers at the school.
No, I agree.
But they kept them at the house, and so we may find people may leave and take a laptop, but only the person may come back.
Well, that becomes it's like checking out a textbook.
I understand, but we're going to let them come back regardless. So people are going to be flowing. If people are going to be flowing back and forth, I'm concerned about how that's going to affect our IT in that position. So I'm just putting it out there.
While we're on people coming back and forth, are we still holding fast that if you're in a choice, if you've choiced into, say, Bayhaven, that if you've kept your kid out and now you want to bring him in, he's going to be allowed to go to Bayhaven? Yeah. Good.
If they've stayed and enrolled in their school, then yes. If they're working remotely, if they've unenrolled from Bayhaven and enrolled in a virtual school, then the answer is no.
Okay,
but
so
if
they
they're
have
doing remote learning, the answer is yes.
Well, that has to be sent out also to parents, that they understand that, because that was a big question. That and gifted education. Are gifted students going to be taught by gifted certified teachers? Okay,
They should
Bridget.
be taught by the teachers in their school.
And that is a common question. I know it was included in the initial FAQs, but listen, I know everyone's drinking from a fire hose, as I say. So for anyone watching, that is, to be clear, if you have brick and mortar, you have in remote at your registered school. So if you have choiced into any kind of program, that's still your registered school. The only time you lose that spot would be in your choiced program would be if you enrolled into a virtual program. That's right. and then
made another choice
or made it so that's correct. Or virtual
really
choice homeschooling
correct.
Left the district.
You've made another choice other than the choice school. You've choiced into a virtual school. Or you've choiced to homeschool. Then you don't have the ability to go back to another choice.
I would like to go back to the technology. Mm-hmm. Again, I do have a sense that, particularly because it's not exactly the same as so if we go remote, if you choose by choice, or if we have to close a classroom, close a school, close the district, mm-hmm. And our instructional staff is prepared to deliver a robust instruction virtually. Virtually. I know a lot of families only have so many devices in their home, and it's not only for 3 hours. This is it would be hypothetically, the way I understand it, it would be live. So the one-to-one at least goal would be prudent.
Correct.
Okay, and so have we quantified that?
Yes. So just so you know, Denise pulled together some numbers because we were asked by the Ed Foundation, do we want to try to pursue getting one-to-one devices as much as possible for those families that need them? So technically, it's not one-to-one device. And so Denise pulled the numbers, and in order to get a computer to every child in our high schools, starting there, and giving every child who needed a computer in the high school, and making sure that it went to every child in the family in the home who needed one. It's about a $1.6 million purchase just for high school.
Oh, just for high school.
For, and I can't remember the device, but it's one that they have dropped and beat up.
Like Lenovo kind of.
It's a AC. It's like $500 laptop.
Yeah.
Because again, in the additional time, which is not that much, ironically, that we have, is those are the things that I would I'm assuming are going to be part of all of that discussion. But for anyone listening, because I think that the technological aspect and then also the internet access, I know that we were scrambling when we went into the ICANN plan post-spring break, and I know there were some allowances made by certain companies. Have those sunsetted, I presume, and is that something we're already prepared for in advance, because that is absolutely going to be an issue as well?
I know the Comcast Essentials was extended, but I don't know for how long.
I think it was through December.
Yeah. So
I might be wrong
I believe
there.
I know that the Comcast Essentials plan was extended.
Right.
Okay. It doesn't help everyone, but.
So at what time, from a capital expenditure, I mean, when do you foresee us having the discussion of whether or not we want to do that? Do we deliver it? Do we purchase that? Because that's one concern of if we really want to continue to have families be remote, be virtual for whatever reason, whether it's by choice or certainly by requirement because of an outbreak. And I don't know that that's that unlikely for a certain given time. What do we need to make as a board from a capital investment if we choose to? And I would have to assume that's going to be pretty soon.
Right, and I mean, so if we want the cameras, I would say that's about $2 million. If we wanted to outfit every classroom, if that's how it worked. Right now, we know at a high school level, it's $1.6 million, but that's using every available refresh computer also.
No, that's using new, and then the refresh to the middle school and to the elementary.
1.6 million for 10,000, 12,000 computers?
I don't have it with me. I don't think.
Or is she only using it based on the ones who requested a computer during the ICANN?
With a percentage up in case they have multiples in the families.
While she's looking for that too, I did get a price. It's $585 per classroom, and that includes a speaker.
Right, that's inclusive of the speaker, but doesn't include the installation or the cording. So.
But do we need them for every classroom?
Well, we can't get them for every classroom right now. We could start, and again, so they would be deployed based upon, because the installation is very quick. You hammer it on the wall and then you plug it into the computer. So that part's not that difficult. It's getting them to the classrooms that would need them, because we don't know what those are yet. So
it's 1.6 million for 2,728 devices.
Okay, so definitely not one-to-one then.
No, it's not one-to-one.
That's more like one.
It's just in need. Yes.
Again.
What was that number again?
1.646319 for 2,728 devices.
That's like a high school.
I think we're going to have to revisit our capital plan.
Yeah, and it also feels like we might want to pull together a list, because since we've made masks or face shields mandatory, I don't know how many of those will need to.
Well, again, the mandatory component now means we must supply, correct? For our students. So that
we can't add it to their school supply list?
Well, we can, but if we have to, now we're talking a lot more than.
You have to at least have it available for people. I'm sure many people will want to bring their own, but.
Mitzi, I thought you ordered 2 million. I remember 2 million for something.
2 million masks?
Maybe it cost 2 million.
Well, no, if it was one mask for every person, one disposable mask was 18 million.
18 million.
For the year?
For the year.
Yeah, I think we brought in 40,000 into the warehouse on our own,
yes.
And then which we purchased, and then we just got, which we spoke about earlier, we just got 15 masks per employee delivered free from the state. So now that's on top of the inventory we have. But based on our discussion today, we'll be bringing more into the warehouse here.
Yeah,
quickly.
The 15 masks, it's the equivalent of 15 masks for employees. But again, you need masks for subs, you need masks for people who leave. You've given masks to other people, but you hire throughout the year, so you need them for all of your new employees as they come in. So it was, essentially it was going to be 5 masks, but now, yeah, and that was 4 pallets full. So now we have 8 times as many
Were those
students,
40,000 the disposable ones or the cloth ones?
Disposable.
I'm wearing them. This is
Okay.
what I'm wearing now. This is what came out of the warehouse.
And you're going to wash that when you get home tonight, right?
I can't guarantee that.
Get some glue to, put those little elastic
So I
things
think
back
now
on.
there's a bigger impact on our general fund than there is on our capital fund.
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah, I mean, I could, and I want to, from a time, I mean, there's a lot, probably more questions. I think we have the guardrails in, but from the capital side, I think there's a lot of things that, and I don't want things to be held up from approval standpoint, because we, again, don't have that much time.
So I mean, I think from our perspective, it would just be good to have direction on, is this what you want us to do? Do you want us to begin purchasing cameras? Do you want us to begin the process of one-to-one computing? If that is the case, then we will figure out what we need to include in the budget and bring that back to you. But we need to start sooner rather than later is my...
Just one board member, and again, I don't have how much it costs, but looking at the options we're putting out and looking at the potential, yeah, I think that's something we have to consider now. And if we're going to be providing a robust educational option, I think I just don't want to see us scramble. But again, I don't know how much all of it costs, and
so it's $1.5 million to do 2,500 cameras, if that is helpful.
And that's operating dollars?
No,
that's capital.
That's capital? What did you just say was operating?
The masks.
The masks are operating.
The mask, they would be considered operating?
Operating.
Oh, it's a consumable.
Okay.
So, and not the value, there's no value.
Yeah.
There's no useful life to it.
Okay,
So-
sure.
Well, yeah, I would like to go ahead with those, 2,700 devices, but maybe either cameras for a third or a half of the classes, because, I don't think it'd be as easy for the elementary teachers to try to be doing both, but I can see how, a physics teacher, we don't have that many classes, so that they could be doing both a class and a live. And I think there's going to be some teachers that are going to say, I don't want that camera in my class.
They will be.
I don't know that we're going to be even able to put a camera in every class. Or are you thinking now that the window's open, just do it?
These are not cameras that are like security cameras that watch you. These are cameras that you have to turn on so that people can watch you. So somebody has to zoom in and you have to let them in order for them to see you. So it's a different kind of camera than a security camera that's on and monitoring you. So it's a little bit different. And two, if we do this, we have to continue to work on the computing side, because if you have a camera in the classroom, it's only as good as if there's a student outside with a computer who can watch. So we have to make sure we have the computers available to the students. So it's kind of if I'm doing this, I have to do this.
Well,
So-
unless you can get a great price to get them all done at once, I wouldn't do them all at once, because, I just
Well,
don't
there's only
see that there's going to be
1,700
available.
available at CDW right now, so,
okay,
so we
well-
wouldn't be able to do them all anyway, but.
Jane?
What did he say?
Yeah, the AP, IB, ACE type classes.
Okay, yeah, that's what I would think.
And gifted certified. Come here, Steve.
Well, here's the thing. If we need this before school starts, and then we determine whether school's in session or we're home for a while. There's just a lot of variables that we have. I don't want to have to pay $1 million to get this stuff here. So I think if we order it so that we don't have to expedite, we don't have to pay extra charges. But it looks like it could be around $5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right?
I would say for all the computers.
With computers and the speakers and the lariats or whatever.
So can I just clarify, though?
and
Do you
hotspots.
want the Ed Foundation to try to pursue purchasing computers? Is
I
that
think
the Education Foundation? They
or
offered to fundraise for computers.
Yes.
Oh, they did?
Yes.
Well, how lovely would that be? Yes, the answer to that is double yes.
I think they're seeking other foundation support from the communications, so. Well, I want to make sure that they know this is an urgent need for us to get that, so.
Yeah, I agree with Mrs. Goodwin. That's my. That's and when we don't meet, I mean, we meet again on the 23rd. So if you need authority, if it's over and above, which it will be, I just agree. I agree with Mrs. Goodwin. We're going down this direction. We gotta act now. I don't want to do it blindly. So
No,
but
I think that if we need be, we'll have a meeting.
Yeah.
Well,
rather than
CDW
waiting.
is already under state contract. You already have authorized us to make purchases from CDW, so that isn't an issue.
Okay.
Yeah, so the authority to spend funds to that vendor already been authorized, so we're okay there.
Eric, sorry.
I heard Mr. Cantis correctly. We're going to start off with the IB, ACE, and gifted programs with the cameras. Is that what you were saying?
No,
that's not what you're saying.
I was just saying, there's going to be a lot of needs, for.
I know there's a rather unique need there because.
Yeah. For the concurrent teachers, there's going to be a lot of different needs, I think, at the high school and middle school level, based on students selecting the remote option. And as those numbers come in, it's really going to help us to narrow down how many teachers we're going to need for that. And then we have the intermittent students that are where we have the intermittent shutdowns and students in this class having to leave and whatever. So that's another factor. But I've received a lot of questions and emails from parents about, and I know you all have too, about IB, AP, ACE. Gifted, specials, VPA, you name it. We received a lot of those. So if we can, as we work towards building this concurrent model, that should take care of all those classes.
But I just want to make sure, talk with these cameras, it can't be simply you turn on a camera and a kid's sitting at home. I mean, the teacher's going to have to do more than that. The teacher's going to have to be able to ask that, kid to make sure he's paying attention. I mean, the teachers have these little handheld things to see whether they're getting it before they move on. So, I mean, there's going to be, going back to the training, it can't be just simply, there's a camera on and we're fulfilling the obligation. So the teacher's going to end up doing a lot more work than they did before, because it's one thing to just look around the room to see if you have eyes glazed over. Now you have to go to the people. Will there be two-way where they can see the students too?
Yeah, just
on
Zoom. Like this.
So just like that.
Just
so we're going to have they're going to have a camera too. Okay.
So the computer can get that. Well, and I think it's only going to be certain teachers that are going to be able to do this. I don't think every teacher will,
I don't either.
Even be comfortable doing this or want to do it.
They have to.
Yes.
Yeah, Chris is just.
This is a whole new paradigm for them.
Right, and Chris is mentioning that one of the benefits is you'll have fewer kids in your classroom, face to face.
Yeah.
So there's that.
But that means you have more kids to interact who are not in your classroom.
There's definitely a learning curve for everyone.
We're not going outside.
The inverse is true too.
There's a lot of teachers that were very, very successful when we did when we used the ICAM plan and we were doing 100% at home. There's a lot of teachers that were very successful. There's some teachers, they can just make this happen just like that, but it's going to require training, especially if we get cameras, and that'll be, to have the extra time is going to be very helpful.
Oh, good.
And we had a lot of success in Summer Boost with personalized, individualized instruction. Great. It was phenomenal. And what those teachers could do with children over, via the internet is, we'll have some demonstrations here during your workshop sometime.
That's great. Thank you. Anything else?
Sure there are, but no. Do you feel like you have the framework of what you guys need for the moment?
The guardrails.
The guardrails?
I think so. I think we're good. We'll start looking at, the procurement pieces. We'll meet with Jennifer Vine and the Ed Foundation, see what we can anticipate in terms of philanthropy support, and then know what the other part of the impact would be to the Capital fund.
And a communication will go out like tonight or tomorrow, letting know that more communication will be coming. No, I'm not saying with the detailed plan, but what transpired today is pretty significant. So even if it's just, here is an update, even I'm telling you, over communication is going to, I'm sure Steve's completely shocked by me saying this, but it should be as early as today or tomorrow, and that you will be hearing more, but this is this is step one. That is how,
And that we're really going to need to hear back from parents in a certain period of time.
I have a quick question. I just got a text from an assistant principal saying, why are we not getting HP Chromebooks? They're $300. That's what most all the schools that I know, school districts, are standardizing on. You don't like the Chromebook?
I'm not for spending more money, but I will tell you their life cycle is short. They're not very.
We've looked at Chromebooks. And
they break very easily.
We use Microsoft products, and this would require a change to a Google type of platform that we don't. You'd have to use Google Docs and Google, the things that we have not standardized in this district. And that's what Joe had mentioned, that that Chromebooks wasn't really an option that we were looking at. We're looking at the
it eliminates
HP.
the need for textbooks and huge laptop to carry. And
no, these are small. They're smaller.
Steve, do you have yours to hold up?
I don't have it with me. Chris, what are you saying? You're saying no.
No. I said he didn't have it with him.
And it's very small.
Stand up. Don't let him push you around, Chris.
They're small laptops, like a Chromebook.
6, 7. When I was the principal, and it's very durable. It's inexpensive, but it can do all of the pieces that we're talking about right now.
No, he's talking about the
Pro ones. It's a ProBook.
Can I just tell you that they looked through 7 different items. I know you don't have this and you haven't seen it, but they looked through 7 different devices and did a very thorough metric on why they would choose that one. It came out on top on all of their different
But
metrics.
it's the multiplication factor.
Okay.
Whatever.
You take a number, multiply times 40,000.
Okay.
Big number.
20 million. There you go.
Yeah.
Anything else? Can I adjourn us? Yes.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.
And I am out of here.
Look at you, were packing up. I could hear you, feel you packing up. Okay. I don't.